April 17th, 2025, to order. We have, let's see, Allison, if you could sit in for Joe Campolito, that would be good. And we have approval of the minutes. Do we have any changes or alterations to the minutes from the last meeting? Hearing none, do we have a motion to accept the minutes from? Do we, second, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All right, moving on. So the new applications for receipt and determination of significance, application CC number 25-12 of Malucci Home Builders LLC, owner for filling and grading activities in the upland review areas and culvert maintenance in wetlands in association with 4-lot single-family home subdivision being built at 40 Holcomb Street, Assessor's Map K03, Block 205, Lot 015, Simsbury.
Thank you, Chairwoman. The applicant is here, but I will do a brief overview of the project beforehand. So this is a application for determination of significance at 40 Holcomb Road. It is a 9.89 acre parcel that they are proposing to subdivide into four lots. The regulated activities for that would be the demolition of the existing house and the 2 barns, as well as filling and grading in the regulated area, and a culvert maintenance project that is in the intermittent watercourse on the south property. There's, stated by the applicant, there's no permanent direct impacts to the wetlands and the watercourse, and they have silt fencing as proposed. And if I could ask the applicant to come up for any additional information. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the commission. My name is Dave Ziax. I'm a professional engineer and a principal with F.A. Hesketh Associates, and we prepared the plans for the applicant that's before you this evening. As Brittany pointed out, it's a 9.89 acre parcel of land. It had a home that was on the site for many, many years, up close to right in the center of the site, right up along Holcomb Street, and then 2 barns in the back corner with another smaller sort of garage shed that are in pretty bad shape right now. The wetlands on the site was flagged by Rick Zulik, who's a certified soil scientist, and the report was submitted with the application. As Brittany pointed out, there's 4 areas, as you can see by the stars. Over on the left-hand side, down in the corner there's a small farm pond with a wetland associated with it that goes north on this map is to the top of the sheet. So here's, if you want to put that aerial up, Brittany, yeah. This is a Google aerial with the boundary line superimposed in that orange color, tan color. And over there on that left-hand side, there's a farm pond of about 6,000 square feet with a small wetland associated with it. Up at the top in that more wooded, moderately wooded area, there's a pocket of wetlands up there. And then there's that watercourse area over on the right-hand side. There's an intermittent sort of drainage ditch more, but it is an intermittent watercourse. That drains about 10 acres of land off the sheet in the rears of the subdivisions and the developed homes off to the sort of the east of this. There's an old driveway that goes across that watercourse that we plan to reuse. Right now, there is an old farm culvert at that location where the crossing takes place that is collapsed and really is not functioning at this time. So that needs to be replaced anyhow with appropriate size conduit in order to maintain that flow through that watercourse. That goes down to Holcomb Street at the bottom of the page, and there's a 24-inch town-owned culvert that goes under the roadway and continues on sort of to the south. So that culvert where the driveway is needs to be replaced regardless. Our plan is, when it's all said and done, is to maintain a 25 to 50 foot native buffer, vegetated buffer around all of these wetland resources. The rest of the site will be mowed lawn. They're going to try to minimize that because of the large size of these, particularly the 2 lots in the rear. Maybe go to the next slide, Brittany. Yeah, so this is a crude coloring of the proposed subdivision. So we'd have 2 lots, those lots 2 and 3 in the front, which is essentially the old home site. Those would be about 1 acre in size. And then the lots 1 and 4 would be much larger than the minimum 40,000 square feet. And what we thought was a good idea up there in that top corner is to put a permanent conservation easement over that portion of the site, which would be 2.34 acres. So out of the acreage of Lot 1, 2.34 acres of that would be put into permanent conservation. And maybe just the last slide. Which is sort of a repeat of the one you've seen. So in yellow would be the boundary lines. The proposed house sites are that tannish colors. You can see I dashed in the house that was just recently demolished along Holcomb Street there. So we're basically replacing that with the 2 home sites there. And, so there's really no significant activities within the 100-foot upland review area. These sites will require septic systems. We've been working with the Farmington Valley Health District on testing on the site. We have sufficient areas for 4 new septic systems. And those will be well beyond the 50-foot setback, minimum setback from the wetlands. They're actually outside the 100-foot regulated area. So I think we have everything spaced out nicely on the site to minimize any kind of impacts. And I would hope that the Commission would see that this is not a significant project or significant activity. And that's it. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. You mentioned a 25-foot buffer. Whereabouts would you have?
Around all the wetland resources, we're looking at a 25 to 50-foot minimum vegetated buffer in the natural vegetation without a mowed lawn.
Okay.
And but there'll be areas where it'll be much greater than that. But that's the goal, is to make sure we have a minimum of 25 to 50 foot.
I think 50 probably would be.
Yeah, and we've got that pretty
If
much.
not more, yeah.
Yeah.
I know driving by the site, over the years, I've seen a lot of standing water down in the area where the barns were. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty flat area. It's not well drained right now, but the soils are actually good. We've been testing out in that area. It's all sandy loam. The groundwater elevation out there right now is about 30 inches in those areas. I've actually seen some photos where the pond, I think the wetland was created on the west side of the pond because the pond has a tendency to, during major storms, to overtop over there. I've seen some old Google photos that suggest it might do that, but that's probably why that wetland pocket formed next to the pond. That pond's clearly a dug farm pond from, I don't know how many years, maybe 100 years ago, but
Yeah.
it's clearly a dug pond. But all in all, it, with a little bit of proper grading and drain and techniques, it'd be fine for home
But no
sites.
modeling was found.
Over
the-
24 inches down, so
Yeah, okay.
it meets the health code.
Yeah.
The ones in the front are no question, they're sitting on sandy, bony gravel, so that's not even an issue there.
No, and there's a slope.
And then there'll be walkout homes.
Okay. And the culvert that would be replacing the one, how big will the culvert be compared to the old farm culvert that's there?
The old farm one's so collapsed, I don't know what it was,
What it
but
was,
we're
yeah.
putting in 2 18-inch culverts, which has more capacity than the 24-inch town culvert down below. And the town engineers asked for some calculations on that. I'm going to give them to them in the next couple of days. But there's actually a fairly decent-sized area to the east. It's all the backyards of all those homes kind of work their way down to this location. But I was there after the last time we had a couple of inches of rain, and that watercourse was still dry. So I think that sandy soil out there is doing a good job in absorbing a lot of the water out there.
It's
Yeah.
been dry
Yeah,
lately.
and it's been dry. It's been, it's not super dry, but it's been dry, yeah.
On one of the maps here, it says reserve area near the homes.
Yeah,
Is that where the septic system?
yeah, you have to show a reserve area for your primary. Hopefully you'll never use it, but that's just the health code.
So that is the leach field? Or,
Yeah, so those places where you see sort of like the 2 parallel bars,
yes.
that would be the system that we install now, and then you have to show a secondary area in the event that you have a failure down, whenever.
As the Conservation Commission, we're always encouraging people to use less lawn, an acreage of lawn.
Yeah, I think most people are heading that way.
That direction, yeah.
Yeah.
And do you have any invasives on site that need to be removed?
Any what?
Invasives?
Not really. The site is pretty much old farm grass or farm.
I was thinking more the shrubs around the edge.
Yeah, what we want to do is clean out the water. The water course has a lot of debris in it, and it just needs to be hand cleaned, and then a new culverts, and that will rejuvenate that. There is also a lot of miscellaneous debris on the property from the ownership in the past. It's all little by little, that's all being cleaned up. And the barns really need to go. I was there yesterday again. They're mouse infested. And
Wow.
they need to go.
But perhaps we can, site visit for the town staff can look to see if the invasives are there. 'Cause
Yeah, we could work with staff on that, sure. If there are any, it's up in the conservation area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's,
Yeah,
still part of it,
right.
so. Do we have any other comments? Yes.
Well, I guess I have a question about the decision to make this a significant activity or not. What are the guidelines for that? Because it's a subdivision with multiple entries coming down the road. Does that make it a requirement for it to be a significant activity?
No, it does not. It does go to planning. It needs approval from planning because it is a subdivision. For wetlands, it would be a couple choices. Either you find the activity to be non-significant towards the wetland soils. You can find it significant and schedule a public hearing. You can also schedule a public hearing just for the public benefit and also find it non-significant at the same time.
So tell me a little more about that last one.
So you can find the activity non-significant, but have a public hearing anyway for the public interest. There's kind of those three options that the commission has for it. So, and if you decide to do that, not all of the requirements kick in, such as the applicant doesn't have to find feasible or prudent alternatives, things like that. But the public would be able to speak to it.
And I think there has been some interest on the public's part on this particular development.
Right, so I want to zero just a little bit more on what you just said,
Mhm.
which is if we declare it not significant for the public, what are the actual things we aren't requiring the applicant to do then?
So the feasible and prudent alternatives, that's the number one. And then there's other criteria that you can require with public hearings that you don't necessarily have to if it's not significant. But it's really the feasible and prudent alternatives is the main difference.
Oh, sorry. I didn't think I had to use it because my voice is so loud. Okay, thank you.
All right. Do we have any more comments? I'd entertain a motion.
I would move that we declare this. I would declare that we move this a not significant activity, but request a public hearing on it.
All right. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
So that public hearing would be on the May 7th meeting,
Okay.
which would be a special meeting.
Is it May 7th?
Yes.
All right. All in favor?
Oh,
Any
did we have a
opposed?
second? Sorry.
We had a second.
Okay.
Yeah. Any opposed? All right, good. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you on the 7th.
Thank-
Moving on to application CC number 25-13 for Michael Nascimento, applicant and owner for a wetland permit for clearing of vegetation in portion of wetlands and filling grading in a regulated area in order to improve backyard conditions at 20 Neal Drive, Assessor's Map B18, Block 501, Lot 009, Simsbury.
Is the applicant here? I didn't get a chance to. Oh. So I'll do a brief summary, but if they can come up to the podium as well. So this is a half an acre property with a single family home. They're proposing some rear yard improvement projects to make the yard more usable. which includes filling and grading to ease the sloped yard, and I have pictures following the slide. Installation of the hard surface patio, roof drainage, and an installation of access points for ADA access to the back. And there's also approximately 50 square feet of proposed encroachment into the soils, which is a marsh type soils, and then the silt fencing is proposed. And this is the picture. I'll have the applicant kind of explain further the project, but the pictures to the right show the sloped backyard.
Good evening, Chair and Commission members. Jim Dempsey. I am the engineer for the Nacimientos at 20 Neal Drive. The project includes improvements to the backyard, leveling to starting with the lower portion where there used to be a retaining wall, and over the years there's been sediment loss and erosion, which brings us to the picture that you see right there of the existing conditions. You can see that the wetlands come right up to that wall. So we're not really proposing to try to go into the wetlands, but we know that the bottom of the revetment wall will impact a portion of the wetlands. So that is the 50 square feet. So what we're proposing is to install the riprap revetment and bring the grade up to a level course, which will be hardscaped, and then install ADA paths, as you can see on there, from the driveway down to the backyard, which is about a 6-foot elevation difference. The project also includes, there's some roof drainage issues. So we've incorporated tying the roof drainage into an infiltration system underneath the hardscape and inside the revetment. If there's any questions or comments.
So by hardscape, do you mean pavement or concrete or bricks?
It would be more. It's going to be like a paver.
Paver.
Yeah,
okay.
a smoother paver.
So there would be
system.
some infiltration through the pavers.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. Yes, and the pavers will not go all the way to the riprap. There's a stone filter with a filter fabric in behind the riprap. So any runoff from the actual hardscape there will go into there, down through the stone, and obviously it'll eventually end up into the marsh, but it's through that filter.
So the riprap is taking the place of the old retaining wall and bringing it up to be level.
Yes, we decided to do that we investigated a couple other scenarios, maybe a large, massive block wall, or a timber retaining wall. But the timber has a problem that the old one did; it'll rot away. The massive block wall, the foundation required for that, because it would be a gravity wall, it would be somewhat substantial. It would be a lot more impact. So the riprap or revetment at approximately a 50-degree angle would be, the least impact and give the most benefit.
Okay. And the filter fabric will keep the fines from going into the
Correct.
wetland?
As it's built, the fill will be brought in behind it. So all of the fill will be on the house side of the filter fabric. Then there's a stone bedding, 3/4-inch stone bedding, and then riprap on top of that.
All right. And the disturbance is just that small red area at the
Yes,
bottom?
yes. That's the disturbance to the wetlands, right? And of course, we would put silt fence in all around the entire, basically the entire site there.
Is there any landscaping planned for the project?
We're planning to plant, native plants at the bottom of the revetment.
All right.
Because as the initial, as you can see there's a couple of trees and some smaller shrubs that will have to be removed that are actually growing out of the top of the old retaining wall.
All right.
So we'll have to remove those to put the revetment in, but then along the bottom of it, the plan is to plant native species, shrubs, transition plants. A lot of what's there is Phragmite.
I see that.
Been creeping in, it looks like year after year, but.
Right. And other than that, no invasives? I mean, other than the Phragmites?
The Phragmites look like they're the
They're the
most
main-
prevalent.
Yeah,
Yes.
all right. Are there other questions from the commissioners? I'd entertain a motion of significance.
Well,
Oh,
you said you're gonna collect all the drains, downspouts?
Correct.
whatnot. Where is
Yes.
that gonna drain to?
They were going into 4 infiltration units that are located. Do you have that slide, Brittany? I'm not sure, I'm not sure what you put up there. It would be,
uh,
there it is, drawing 5 of 6.
Okay, so as we're getting that,
Yeah.
so the back edge of the property right now is wetlands?
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
Is there a water course there, or is it just kind of there,
It
standing water? and
it seems to be pretty a constant. I'm not saying that it's stagnant, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of change in that water elevation.
So it's just sort of
You're
wet?
yeah,
like,
it's wet.
You described it as a marsh?
That's it right there. It's, so there's 4 downspouts. We're trying to put them into 4 infiltration units that will be housed underneath there with an overflow at the end that would then go into a riprap area.
So those are just dry wells, if I see this?
Basically just dry wells, yes.
And those big 3 circles on the top?
That is the septic system, which are also dry wells. The infiltration rates reported when these were installed was about 1 inch in 5 minutes. So relatively good drainage for the soil.
So the little sliver where it's going to be impacted, is that where the wall is right now, basically? Or
That
or
is
what
that
was
is
left of the wall?
just in front of where the wall is right now.
Okay.
I don't know, can you just scroll up a couple of slides? Just, yeah. So that would, no, I think it's the next one down. Keep going down. It must be the very last one, the very last slide. Down, please. There, that would be the finished product. And we know that through that area, because the toe is going to slump, you need a little bit of a larger footprint for that toe of the revetment. That's going to touch into the wetlands, similar to what you see right there. Through that cross section. And then we have the infiltration units that are underneath the hardscape.
Is there any concern about the toe of the slope sinking into the the mucky soils?
I'm not concerned about that with the stone bedding and the filter fabric that'll be there. I think that'll be fine. That was the concern with the massive block wall. I was afraid we did consider going around the wetlands, but that creates sort of a stress concentration right at the bottom of that inside corner for the revetment and the wall. So we're trying to build something that we have to do once, and then that's it. Hopefully it takes care of the erosion issues and everything.
Any other questions? I'd entertain a motion.
I'll move that we find this a not significant activity and schedule for its decision in its regular meeting.
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. All right. Thank you. So the next application, CC number 25-11 of Michael Fernandez, applicant and owner for a wetland permit for filling and removal of 3 trees in the regulated area at 21 Wingate, Assessors Map C05, Block 203, Lot 048, Simsbury.
So this is another single-family home. This is on a 1.61 acre parcel. They are proposing some fill grade activity to level out the sloped backyard, as well as a removal of 3 trees. So it'll include 54 yards of fill to raise the lawn and level off the slope, and then approximately, if you'll see here, 95 square feet of impact to the wetlands, which is basically established lawn. And the owner is here to answer any questions.
So is this a house that was built before the wetlands regulation?
No.
Or is this just a lawn that's expanded into the
This is a lawn-
wetlands?
Yes. So
Oh.
there was mapping that I found in the file that suggested the wetlands line was further away from the home, but it wasn't mapped that way for some reason. So we have to use the mapped soils.
Huh.
But it did, the map I saw kind of followed the tree line that's there now. So that made me think that that was the true wetland soils. But without an amendment, we can't.
So is the wetlands map based on air photo? Is it, has it been tested to see if these are wetland soils?
No. Nope.
We might want to do that.
Who might want to do that?
Well,
The-
the town, I mean, since we go, I know it's already lawn and it's, but this is not one of the houses that was built prior to the wetlands regulation. So if it's a case that the lawn has expanded into the wetlands, that gets a different situation.
Understood. I understand what you're saying. We don't really have the capacity to,
No.
or the
No, but this gets
functionality to
This
do
gets tricky. I mean, we.
If I could add some context.
Yes.
Mike Fernandez, applicant and owner of the property. We bought the home a little over 2 years ago now, and all of the lawn that's currently established and mowed has been there, I don't know how long, but certainly since
Yeah.
before we had moved in. So I've been just maintaining the current,
Yes.
established lawn that's in place. Again, I'm not a professional in terms of wetland soil or anything like that, but on the left-hand side behind the screen, behind the house there, like on the top picture, you can see there's a good amount of established lawn. That's a walkout basement. I don't know, again, based on the boundary of the wetlands, if there would have been the ability to establish lawn back there if it was wetland soil. Again, I'm not 100% sure.
It can
on
always be
that.
established. It might get a little soggy, but is that area wet?
As you get further to the bottom of the page, it is reasonably wet down there. It's a combination of, I'd say, mostly grass, a little bit of moss. So it's, the further you get away from the house, the more wet it gets. But I'd say anywhere, kind of where, if you took the blue line on the site map and just went all the way across the back of the lawn, anything above that is pretty dry. But, we're obviously dealing with this, on the right-hand side, just for what we're not trying to actually go back behind the slider, the walkout slider on the left-hand side. We're really just looking to stay, behind the driveway where right now the pitch is, decently severe. We have 3 girls under 4 years old, trying to get them, outside as they get a little older. So the idea is a little bit of a quicker, drop off just from where the driveway is, and then use that fill, as Brittany stated, the clean fill and organic topsoil to just level it out a little bit, and then drop off, somewhat quickly before you get into the wood line. If you look at the picture on the bottom left, you can see the wood line, kind of where that is. We wouldn't be impacting that. We would just be staying currently on where the grass area is, and then dropping off, before we get into the currently wooded area.
So the view, is the long view is what you're looking at in the
Yep.
lower pictures? The long dimension? Yeah.
Yep, that's the exact space. So, you can see the driveway kind of on the left there of the bottom left picture, like in the top left corner. That's the driveway. The trees that we would be removing are actually not in the wetlands boundary. It's in between ours and the neighbor's property. So you're kind of looking right at them. If you look at yeah, exactly. Brittany's using the laser there on where those are. So the 3 trees are there. There's no vegetation that would be impacted that's currently in the wetlands.
Is there any slope going on the 30-foot edge? Is this towards your neighbors? Is there a slope there, or is it flat there?
It's all relatively
It's
sloped.
all sloping towards the tree line at the bottom?
Exactly. And we wouldn't be drastic, we wouldn't be changing it to maintain the water, obviously. We still want it to go that way as it has been. It would just be trying to level it off a little bit more in the middle for a space for the kids, and then would drop off a little bit quicker, as you get to the wooded area.
So, yeah. Go on, Charles.
So I'm a little unclear, like, where on the map, as of now, where are the wetlands defined?
So on that top picture, the light green line is the mapped wetlands. Going straight across.
Okay, that's the part of the wetlands.
Right.
So even if if this were to happen, and you had that steeper slope headed towards the woods, if anything over time sort of that smoothed out, would just be going to the woods, would not be going to the wetlands. Okay.
Well, it's going, according to the map, it's going towards the wetlands. Is that what you mean?
I'm thinking
It's going toward the forested
it's going
area.
towards. Okay, because that's a driveway up there. So the 30-foot is basically along the slope where we go.
Mm-hmm.
So it would go towards the wetlands. I got it.
And it-
But in that one corner.
Yes.
It's just that one corner that's
It's
in the
just that
wet-
one corner.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's all according to our map.
Right.
But we
Right.
don't have any other independent evidence that that's really wetlands or not.
Right. Just the pictures that we see of it being lawn.
So instead of one gentle slope, it would be flat, and then a somewhat steeper slope?
Yeah, just slightly quicker. So from the driveway, say the first 5 feet, it might drop off a foot, versus the current gradual slope, and then be a little bit more level, and then again, just a quicker drop off, just so a little bit more of a leveled off space in the middle.
All right. Do you have any invasive plants on your site?
Sorry?
Do you have any invasive plants you need to remove on your site?
Not,
ask
not
everyone.
in, not in this portion, no.
Or any other portion of your yard? Burning bush?
Not that I know of.
I ask everyone. All right, so do you have another question, or? All right.
So I just, out of curiosity here, I wasn't clear, so when the house was built, when was the house built?
I think it was 78, 78 or 79, yeah.
So was it
So that
before?
was before the,
So it was, because I can't imagine that would, with the wetlands line going through like that. that
Right,
would've-
right. Yeah,
so
it was,
So it was
really,
before.
the wetland.
All right.
So it
Right.
was in 86?
right. I just don't know if it was, right, 87.
87, okay.
Well, 87 was the end of the grandfathering of houses in the wetlands.
All right, that slightly changes it, yeah. All right. Are there any other questions? All right, I'd entertain a motion.
I move this is not a significant activity, and we will adjudicate it at the next regularly scheduled meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All right, that's unanimous. All right,
Thank you.
thank you. All right, let's see, discussion and possible action of application CC number 25-08 of Mary and Robert Huckvale, applicant and owner for a wetland permit to construct a 20 by 25-foot addition to the rear of home on wetland soils at 48 Pine Glen Road, Assessors Map D17, Block 204, Lot 017, Simsbury.
Yep, so this was heard at the previous meeting, April 1st, and deemed non-significant. It is the 20 by 25 addition in the rear of the home, proposed in wetland soils. This was one of those homes that were built prior to that. The current porch is 16 by 16.7, but this addition will take the place of that. And then the silt fencing will be proposed as stated. Is the homeowner here? No. Or the applicant?
Hello. Robert and Mary Huckvale, my son Chris Hinman, and Peter Hinman. Did you read? You didn't hear that either, did you? You okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
So yeah, any questions for the applicant?
I know we discussed this at the last meeting. Does anyone have any questions on this particular application? You're going to be using the silt fence. It's on this existing area. I mean, this is one of those homes that was built prior to the wetlands law. So it was built on wetland soils, but that's the way it is. You know, if you can add any wetland plants along the edge to the wetlands, that would be good. But otherwise, do we have any other conditions?
There's a motion at your table.
Would someone like to read? Yes, thank you.
I move that the Inland Wetlands and Water Course Commission, application CC 25-08, Pine Glen, Mary and Robert Huckvale, in order for a wetland permit to construct a 20 by 25 addition on the rear of the home be approved as the project will not adversely impact the wetland soils or water courses, and the soil and erosion control measure will be utilized so as not to further impact the wetlands, and subject to the staff conditions on the report.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Good luck with your project.
Thank you very much.
All right. On to item 6, public hearing. We are still in public hearing for application CC number 25-02 of McLean Affiliates, Inc., applicant and owner for a wetland permit to construct 52 new residential units at the existing McLean Retirement Community with associated improvements in the wetland soils and upland review area at 75 Great Pond Road, Assessors Map E08, Block 147, Lot 001, Simsbury. This has been continued from February 18th and March 20th and April 1st. It says I think we're going to open up to public hearing first because we do have, no? Because we do have someone who wants to speak.
So
Public
at the last
comments,
meeting,
rather.
you suggested that perhaps before getting into full public comment, you would want to have a discussion amongst the commission, kind of to gauge where you are. Is there additional information you may need? I thought perhaps Charles has given it some thought. Perhaps he could lead the discussion. But that was my understanding.
Yes.
You're the chairwoman. You could
No,
you
I
could do
know
whatever you want.
there
But
was someone who wanted to speak early, yes.
again, that's up to you. But you had indicated you wanted to have a conversation amongst the group.
We could do that. Charles?
So I'll just say that my only thought on this was that if we had a chance to sort of talk about what we thought was missing or things that were holding us up or things that we were concerned about a little bit, then the public, during the public comment session, they could be addressing them if the answer's out there. But we could also just invert it as well and hear what people have to say right now. But sooner or later, we're going to have to figure out what we think is what we've heard or missing, et cetera, and that means you have to have some time to talk.
Well, I know we also did get some new information today, some at 5 o'clock, so I know I haven't had a chance to look at that, so some of that might address, I know, some of the interest, but our main concern is for the inland wetland are the crossings, the upland review areas, and for the Conservation Commission, we have a whole host of issues.
Right. And I'll just say that one of the comments early on was about jurisdiction in the Inland Wetlands Commission and whether the Inland Wetlands Commission had the authority to look at things outside of the wetlands upland review area, which was part of the concern. And I think that there's been some discussion about that, so I wasn't sure whether that was resolved or not.
Well, I think staff put together a very good, what do you call this, a summary
Summary.
of the various jurisdictions for both the inland wetlands and then the conservation. For conservation, we will be making recommendations to zoning, who has oversight for most of these things, but we will be doing that. But we do have the authority, we can ask for various things outside the scope of the inland wetlands, wearing our conservation hat.
Yes, I would agree. So I guess the question is, if we have to go back a couple of meetings now, there was a direct comment about sort of the biological or the wildlife categorization and whether the impact of that and the waterways relative to the stream was a requirement that the Inland Wetlands Commission could rule on, because that was proposed as that. But I've heard, and we've always operated under the other assumption. We've always operated under it's a much more narrowly defined system. So I haven't, we're going back to the original one, which, I'm understanding. So I'm waiting. I was sort of looking for a definitive discussion of that part.
So for that, you mean for the nutrient movement in and out of the wetlands?
Well,
wildlife?
and so the question really comes down, I think, to is it just the Conservation Commission? So what I hear, and I'm not saying one way or the other, but the argument that's been sort of that that I've heard in my head is that if we had a preponderance of evidence that there was going to be significant damage to a wildlife system that's associated with something, I don't review, but it's not in the upland review area, we would not have the power to stop anything, and it's unclear, and it would go to zoning, who are not the experts in this. And so I'm not saying that's the situation I'm in. I'm an engineer pretending to be a lawyer, but I'm trying to wonder about that case. Like and that's the thing I'm looking for. So I'm wondering if the rest of the committee has that resolved in their head.
I do not have that resolved.
Okay.
I'm stuck in the same place you are.
Okay.
And I know there's,
I agree with you, Charlie. It's a,
which is,
where do we stop and start?
Okay. So we have that as a confusion. We can just let that be. So maybe if people are addressing that in the public comments, that would be a good place to help us. The other one that I was interested in was there's been some comments. There's been a lot of science about like where's the water move through this system, and there was a question about the impact this would have on possibly any other wells because of the system that's moving through this. Now, those are not in the upland review area, but that's part of, again, things that do with the waterways. Does the Inland Wetlands Commission have jurisdiction over that? Or is that a zoning issue?
zoning has authority over aquifers, and we don't. George?
So staff produced a revised staff report late today as all this additional testimony was coming in. We were kind of waiting a little bit to see what more we would get. Staff's recommendation is generally going to be consistent with what we have recommended previously on any application you reviewed, which is to say that your jurisdiction is much narrower as it relates to the wetlands. Your focus is normally and should be, are the activities proposed, do they have an adverse impact on the wetlands and the wetland soils? You have testimony, you want to, when we talk about wildlife, again, I'm not playing the role of town attorney here. I'm playing the role of staff. But related to wildlife, you have some testimony, really from both sides, in fact, related to how narrow your review can be. And, the courts have identified a specific test related to that type of adjudication. And I'll read from my staff report. I'm just going to read the whole paragraph so everybody can hear it. So the commission wears two hats: an inland wetlands agency responsible for wetlands permitting and administration based on statutory authority, and a conservation commission responsible for advisory review and recommendation to the zoning commission or the planning commission, as the case may be, on a wider variety of environmental topics. The commission has heard testimony related to the potential impacts of the proposed activity on a variety of species, including the box turtle and the American woodcock. Courts have cautioned that inland wetland commissions are not little environmental protection agencies. It does not appear that it does appear that Connecticut environmental law may allow consideration of wildlife species and impacts if such activity will likely impact or affect the physical characteristics of such wetland or watercourse. to put it more succinctly, will the project have an adverse impact on the box turtle or other species? So let me read that. So, to put it more succinctly, will the project have such an adverse impact on the box turtle or other species so as to affect the physical characteristics of the wetland? And is there expert testimony on the record that supports this claim? Both the applicant and the intervener have submitted expert testimony on this topic. In addition, a presumed third-party expert has also submitted testimony today regarding the box turtle. The natural diversity database maps do not show evidence of endangered, threatened, or species of concern in the wetlands or upland review area of this subject property. We note that the applicant has included revised functions and values matrices in their 4/14/25 submission. Nonetheless, the applicant should expand on how the submission, testimony, and ongoing revisions have fully addressed the regulatory expectation. And that is from 7.6 of your regulations, which says the applicant should address a description of the ecological communities and the functions of the wetlands and watercourses involved with the application and the effects of the proposed activities on these communities and wetlands function. So I write that the commission should rely on the physical impacts on the wetlands test when adjudicating. We note that the Zoning Commission has broader statutory scope vis-a-vis wildlife and habitat under wider public health, safety, and welfare concept. The Zoning Commission can consider a variety of environmental issues as appropriate related to such topics as the night sky, air pollution, and loss of habitat. The Inland Wetlands Authority is exceptionally narrow according to state statute. It's the role of the Conservation Commission. In its role as the Conservation Commission, the body is free and encouraged to make advisory recommendations to the Zoning Commission on environmental issues beyond the direct impacts on the wetlands features. So again, issues related to traditional wildlife corridors, preservation of open space, invasive plant species, general landscaping, among other environmental topics may be addressed and recommended to the Zoning Commission. Again, the Inland Wetland Agency should not rely on the broader subject matter when rendering its decision on the application.
Thanks. Another question in my list of things is that we have seen sort of engineering issues with implementations of water, from other construction water issues that didn't go as expected. The learning from that gets reflected to which committee at this point in time? Is it the inlands and wetlands because it's waterways, or is it zoning? So if we have an issue with something maybe that's being proposed in one of our applications, but we know in the past that it's had a problem, who incorporates that information into their decision process?
Charles, ask that one more time.
Okay, so I'll get more specific. Let's assume that the engineering answer is to put a culvert in of X size and to divert water away from someplace, and all of a sudden you find out that that water is not going where it was because there was an engineering issue, but it all went to the specs of what we did at the time. Who incorporates that learning into their decision process? Is it inlands and waterways, our commission, because we're handling that, or is it some other part of the town? For instance, if somebody had a problem and they wanted to come to the town to deal with it, who would be dealing with it?
So there's a couple ways to answer that. The town engineer is responsible for the review of stormwater plans, erosion sediment control plans. And just so everybody knows, he's invited here tonight and he's sitting next to us, Mr. Kessler. But as it relates to your review, your responsibility is to review and approve activity that affects the wetlands and the wetland soil. So stormwater management related to wetland soil, yes. And so those questions, you heard testimony about stormwater design potentially or allegedly could harm the wetlands area in terms of recharge, for instance, right? So you've got, again, you have testimony on both sides of that. But where the stormwater management design affects and has a potential adverse impact on the wetlands, that is your responsibility. But it's not your responsibility to generally approve overall stormwater management plans.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, given that, and I know we have someone who would like to speak tonight for public audience, I think we'll go with public audience first, and then we will go with the applicants. I think, 'cause that's what you, all right. Or we could do the one person first? We could do the one person first and then open it up to the.
So yeah, we had a request from a citizen to speak early.
Yes.
As opposed, kind of an out of
So-
turn, and that is your
All
prerogative,
right,
ma'am.
so I will do that. So we do have, if you'd like to come up, yeah. We do have, we'll do one public audience, and then we'll open it up to the applicant, and then the intervener, and then back to the public audience again.
Thank you. I feel a little bald at the moment because my comments are not designed to address the wetlands issues. But I think,
Do you want to speak to the microphone then?
is this better?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry? Yeah, I'll do that in just a second. So I will proceed with that limitation in mind. My name is Mike Long. I live at 50 Sarah Lane and have been an active Simsbury resident since 1969 and would like to share some thoughts about this special community with you. Again, it does not have anything to do with wetlands or wet soils or whatnot. It does have to do with the human condition, however. Born and raised in Hartford, I and my bride Ann, also Hartford born and raised, moved to Simsbury when I was employed by Ensign Bickford Industries, then a 130-year-old privately held manufacturing company headquartered in Simsbury. And we moved into one of the company's 160 privately owned homes. Our 3 children attended the Simsbury school systems, and we quickly became enamored with and active in this wonderful community. I personally became very active in a number of civic organizations, including St. Mary's Church, the local JCs, the Simsbury Land Trust, as well as in local government on several boards and commissions, including at different times, both the planning and zoning commissions, as well as the Board of Selectmen, 10 years on the Finance Board, and 25 years on the Simsbury Police Commission. Living and working in this community was a real privilege, and early on, as I became more and more aware of the deep and long-term roots of the founders of Ensign Bickford, I also became more deeply aware of the equally deep and spectacular roots and history of Simsbury's U.S. Senator George McLean and all that he had contributed to this and surrounding communities in the preservation of natural resources, bird flyovers, as well as pre-social security ways to provide shelter, care, maintenance, nursing, and medical services to worthy adult persons. So it has to do more with the human condition than it does with the soil emissions. My wife was a registered nurse nurse manager at St. Francis and Mount Sinai Hospitals in Hartford for over 30 years. And 6 years ago, we decided that we wanted to live out our latter lives in Simsbury if we could find a place to our liking. which is also a condition that, with the population growth Simsbury has experienced over that same 50 years, from something like 6,800 people when we first moved to town to 28,000 people now. There are a lot of people in the condition and in the situations that we found ourselves. Getting older in life, things have changed. Now what do? We chose the newly planned Goodrich at McLean because we wanted to live out our lives in a place rooted in compassion, care, and community, close to nature and close to the friends and family that we cherish. Sadly, my wife didn't live long enough to see that plan fully realized, but I did, moved in when the Goodrich opened, and I'm grateful every day that we made the choice when we did. Lastly, another relevant, perhaps, condition. Simsbury is in danger of pricing itself out of business. There's been a little or no growth in the town's taxable grand list in the past few years. Taxes went up 5% 2 years ago, 4% last year, and are projected to go up as much as 2.5% this year. The Meadows, when complete, will add a significant amount of revenue to the town annually through property tax payable by the developer and auto taxes payable by residents, but will not add $1 of additional expenses to the largest bucket in the town budget, schools. So there are a number of Simsbury residents who are in the same boat, the same pickle that I and my wife had found ourselves in. And this is the kind of project and solution that makes it all worthwhile. Thank you very much.
Very much. All right, now, the applicant. Hello, TJ.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the Commission. Thank you for your continued consideration and attention to this application, which is so important to McLean and the community. Our presentation tonight will include an introduction of Attorney Joe Williams of Shipman and Goodman as a member of our team. He's an expert in land use appeals, and all things inland, wetland, and water courses. He's a state authority. Additionally, Tom Daly, Megan Raymond from SLR, and Dennis Quinn, a leading herpetologist, will review the modifications and additions to our original application, including revisions which decrease the dimension of the wetlands area affected, modifications to the crossing structures in the wetlands area, and the prudent and feasible changes made responsive to the evolution of the plan and the input of the town engineering staff. Our modifications and revisions which show relocation and diminishment of the overall footprint, new plans which call out the wetlands plantings to be planted in the wetlands areas, modifications of clustering and organizing structures to reduce the areas of construction, including the reduction in lawn areas, a report on biological conditions on the site, a report on size and conditions of wetland number 8 and impacts associated therewith, and water table analysis, revisions and improvements to the stormwater management plan, projections of the limited influences of the project on Hop Brook watercourse, herpetological evidence and mitigation preservation strategies relating to the eastern box turtle with the introduction of Dennis Quinn. Right now, Joe Williams will take a few minutes to help frame the issues and legal principles which should guide and support your deliberations. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commission members. I am the mentioned Joe Williams. I'm an attorney and partner in the law firm of Shipman and Goodwin. Our offices in Hartford, New Haven, and Stamford. I've been practicing wetlands, environmental, and land use law around the state of Connecticut for a little over 30 years, and my firm has been involved in a number of the major appellate decisions that help shape the wetlands law in our state. And so I'm glad you asked the question. I believe it was Commissioner Haldeman, although I was over here on the other side of the podium, but about wetlands jurisdiction and the issues within your authority, because that's what I wanted to give a little summary of tonight, and just refreshing, to hear the question asked and to hear the very good input from your staff on that, because sometimes other commissions and other places will make assumptions about it, or they're not willing to ask the question, and then they can get it wrong. So kudos to you. you've heard a lot of information. Now, I've just been hired before this, I think the fourth night of public hearing, but I have reviewed the materials and the minutes, and so I'm aware that you've had a lot of issues brought up and thrown at you, some of which fall outside of really the legal scope of what a municipal inland wetlands agency in Connecticut is asked to decide. And every inland wetlands agency in our state is governed by, of course, the State Inland Wetlands Act, and so that's why you see wetlands regulations very similarly structured all around the state, and the issues and the standards are the same for every town in Connecticut. So just to summarize the few key standards that govern your decision here. First, the question the statute asks an inland wetlands agency is whether there is substantial evidence of a likely adverse impact to wetlands or watercourses. Not possible, not it may happen, not I'm concerned, I'm afraid it could happen, is it likely? So our courts have said that evidence of general environmental impacts, mere speculation, or general concerns do not qualify as substantial evidence. Second, an upland review area by state statute is not a buffer or a no-build zone. The state legislature specifically removed the word buffer from the state statute about 20 or so years ago to make that clear. Rather, the upland review area is simply a regulatory trigger to review activities within it. And so just because there is an activity in the review area does not by itself prove that there's a likely adverse impact to wetlands. And the statute at section 22A42 confirms that a wetlands agency can regulate areas outside of wetlands so long as, one, it's in accordance with your regulations, and two, it applies only to activities, again, likely to impact the wetlands. Number three, as I believe your staff correctly mentioned in their report, an inland wetlands agency is not a little EPA or a wildlife protection service generally. The statute at section 22A41 confirms this. It states that wetlands, the definition of wetlands, includes wildlife habitat in wetlands. And it also states that an application cannot be denied for a regulated activity in an area outside wetlands on the basis of impact on wildlife unless those activities will likely impact the physical characteristics of the wetland. So that's where an inland wetlands agency like yours must focus its inquiry. Is there an impact on the physical characteristics of the wetland? And here on that subject, you have evidence before you that there is no wetland-dependent species that anybody has identified or talked about here. There's no impact with regard to wildlife onto the physical characteristics of the wetland. Nonetheless, you're going to hear from our herpetologist here this evening, Mr. Quinn, about measures that he is designing to help protect eastern box turtle on the property nonetheless. And fourth, on the question of whether there is a feasible and prudent alternative, the question under the statute, this is again 22A41, is whether there is a feasible and prudent alternative to the specific regulated activity that would cause less environmental impact to wetlands. And feasible means, is it possible as a matter of sound engineering? And prudent means, is it reasonable considering the benefit of the activity and considering the cost? So applying those key standards and the statute as written, I believe would lead to a few observations. First, this application, as I think you know, has few direct wetlands impacts associated with two wetlands crossings that are necessary to access the developable portion of the property. Our engineers have designed and minimized those crossings to cause the least impact possible, now with three-sided box culverts or bridge-like culverts that you'll hear more about tonight. And then the question under the feasible and prudent alternative standard becomes, is there a better way to make those crossings? And the answer is no, which you'll hear more about tonight. Plus, we've provided mitigation to compensate for those impacts. And as for the remaining activities in the upland review area, we would contend there is no evidence before you of any likely indirect wetlands impacts either. The stormwater system is soundly designed, it's been thoroughly scrutinized, and I believe your deputy town engineer has acknowledged that it generally meets the DEP manual, and it has the requisite retention that shows that it will sufficiently renovate water quality. Nonetheless, my client, wanting to be as sensitive as possible and responsive to questions and concerns that have been raised, has approved a substantial reduction in the direct wetland impacts and in the work and the impervious area within the upland review area. And we believe our proposal that's before you now will not impact wetlands or watercourses in any adverse way. And we'd like to tell you more about that tonight, so I'm going to call up first Tom Daly, our lead civil engineer with SLR, who will address some of those issues and review the changes that have most recently been made to the proposal. Any questions for me? Thank you.
So while Brittany brings up our presentation, for the record, Tom Daly with SLR Consulting. I'm a professional engineer licensed in the state of Connecticut. Next slide, Brittany. Thank you. So as Joe indicated, I believe I wasn't able to attend at last, top button, okay. I wasn't able to attend last meeting, but the prior meeting we did, or part of that meeting was we presented to this commission a chart that showed feasible and prudent alternatives. But with the receipt of some additional comments from the commission and from town staff, we took another look at the feasible and prudent alternatives and how we were going to cross the wetlands. And as you recall, we had presented to this commission, frankly, the three ways you cross a stream are you start with a pipe, that would be the least one. We were proposing a four-sided box culvert. We were sinking it into the grade so it would have a natural stream channel, and it was 6 feet wide. We have now revised that to be a 18-foot wide culvert, so essentially a bridge structure. So the proposal now is 3 times what we presented to you last time. Generally, the wetland. So if you see here, let's see. I think that's. See if this. So this is the proposal that we have now. So it's essentially a bridge structure, but it's a pre-engineered structure, 3-sided. It will be set on a footing on the side, but it'll span the wetlands. We are still showing a small amount of regulated activities because you do have to excavate down and put that footing in the ground. So you have to excavate down, put the footing, you backfill it, and then you bring the culvert in. But you can see on the graphic here is dashed in red is the width of the old, basically what we were presenting to you at the previous meeting, and you can see now the width of the culvert now is 18 feet. So, and you can see it almost virtually meets the width of the wetland crossing at both locations. The wetlands vary anywhere from, I think, 18 or 16 feet to, so I'll give you an example, in this area here, the wetlands are probably about 16 to 15 feet wide, and then they may get out to about 20 or 22 feet wide. So the 18 foot is essentially spanning virtually all the wetlands, but we are still telling you when you excavate down, you got to have some side slopes, you got to put the footing in, and we'll backfill that. But the proposal this evening is to present both culvert crossings will be a clear span 18 foot. They will still be 3 feet high because we also want to get the utilities across them, and we also didn't want to bring the retaining walls up really high because that would increase more activities. So as I said here, the blue area are the new wetland crossings. Here and here, I'll show you a chart recently, but at wetland crossing number 1, which is the northern crossing, we've reduced the activity just down to 618 square feet. And on wetland crossing 2, this is the area where the existing farm road already exists. That wetland crossing has been reduced down to 517 square feet. So, and when we put in this chart here, original, it's really the revised application. We didn't go back to the original submitted application, but under both scenarios, we have reduced the direct wetland impact by over 60% from the revised application, to the point where once, and if we look at the, if we look at directed wetland impacts, we had presented this chart to you And this is a pretty standard analysis of the most, the relatively, the crossing that would have probably the greatest impact would be a standard pipe culvert. Number 2 was a box culvert. Number 3 was what we were proposing before, which was an oversized box culvert where we would set that bottom of the culvert below grade and get a natural stream bottom. And then we presented this chart to you, and we showed that a small bridge or arch culvert to span the wetlands would be the least amount of impact, greatest amount of cost. It does take a little more time to construct because you have to put those footings, you have to form them. They do sell precast footings, but so there's a little bit of a little more excavation adjacent to the wetland, but by pushing it out to 18 feet, we're at the perimeter of those wetlands. So this was the chart we presented to you. We are initially presenting this alternate, the revised plan. We've now gone to the alternate that has the least amount of impact, and by increasing that span from 6 feet to 18 feet, it significantly decreased the direct wetland impacts. In addition to that, there was discussion of infiltration and our stormwater basins. Town engineering staff had also asked for that. And if you recall, at the last meeting, we had actually gone out and done additional soil testing. It resulted in the stormwater basins being reconfigured slightly to get the best soil. In addition to that, when we did our calculations, we used the infiltration rate that the DEP manual recommended as an assumption. But we went out there and did in situ. We actually went out there and tested the soils where the basins are going to be. And what we found was that the soil infiltration rates are significantly better than what we estimated in our calculations. So under the DEP manual, we were using 0.5 inches per hour, I think, inches per hour. When we went out in the field, we got 15 inches per hour. So it justifies and validates the analysis, but also it shows how much more conservative our calculations are. We did not reduce the basin side. We're going to stick with the bigger basins to get even more infiltration into the ground. But the good news was the infiltration rates that we found in the glacial till layer, or in the layer where the basins are, is far exceeds than what we used in our calculations. And it validated the fact that good infiltration is possible and will be found in these basins. And these tests were done by a professional engineer out in the field. In addition to that, we received some additional comments about what are other opportunities we can find to promote infiltration, get water back into the ground. And what we are proposing is in between the buildings, there's in some locations, when we compress the project back to reduce the overall footprint of the project, it required some yard drains to be put between the units to catch the water. Because it got compressed, the ability to put swales in was hard because it was just, we tightened everything up. So we have about 15 yard drains that roof leaders are going into, and they're catching some small lawn areas. We went back, and once we looked at the infiltration rates, we are going to convert all 15 of those yards into dry wells to promote infiltration. So by getting the roof leaders in there, and all the pipes that go from those dry wells to the storm drainage system will be perforated pipe. So it allows for additional infiltration to occur. This is just for roof area. These are not proposed for any drainage system in the road. We want that to be collected and go through the stormwater system. But anytime we have small lawn areas or roof area, and roof area is generally considered clean, we're going to get that into those yard drains. So we converted 15 yard drains in the wetland 8 watershed to dry well yard drains. So what you'll see is if you walk out there, they would look generally the same. but below grade, there'll be a perforated concrete structure that allows water to infiltrate to the extent possible. We didn't take it in credit in the calculations. It's just an additional best management practice. And then there's about 1,000 feet of storm pipe that connects these yard drains together or connects to the drainage system in the road. And those will also be perforated pipe to let exfiltration and infiltration occur out of those pipes. Also, essentially, we're basically pulling about 1.2 acres of roof water out of the system and getting that back into the ground in terms of that. They will still have high-level overflows. So when we get a bigger storm event, or there might be a time of year where the infiltration rate is not as good as other times of year, it'll still overflow and it'll still play into the calculations that we presented to the town and to this commission. So once again, we did not revise the calculations to take advantage of these. These are just best management practices to, once again, promote additional infiltration into the ground. We did talk a little bit about, but the comment has come up again. So as we get greater infiltration in the system, we're also going to decrease the amount of volume of water coming off the site. In the end, volume of water is not a calculation required by the state of Connecticut. But just to give you a context, once again, Hop Brook is a very, very large watershed, over 3,000 acres. We're only at 2.1 acres of the total watershed. And if you look at the development portion of the watershed, we're even smaller. So in terms of volume of impact to the Hop Brook watershed and the overall volume of the water going there, it's virtually impossible for this project to have any impact because we're just so small portion of the watershed. In addition to that, with the best management practices we put into the project to meet both your town and the state standards, these are going to be even less of a chance for impact. In addition to that, while somewhat unrelated to this application, as you know, the application today is over in this area. But there has been some information provided about Washburn Drive, and I just wanted to put that in some of the context. It's somewhat pointed considering some of the previous applications that were before you this evening. When we mapped the wetlands on this campus many years ago, you can see in dark green there, this is mapped wetlands. The Goodrich building is right here, Burkholder is here, and then Washburn Drive is here. All this area is sloping towards Washburn Drive. And essentially, the wetlands are mapped right to the property line. We know wetlands don't stop at property line. I don't know the age of the Washburn Drive, but I think it would be a similar conversation to what you heard from your other applications. But the age of the homes, I think, probably predate your wetland regulations. And the fact that these wetlands are really essentially right at the property line, I would suspect that those were wetlands when those houses got built. And so I'm not diminishing the fact that they may have water problems on those areas. I think the reality is the natural wetlands are flowing that area, and it was a drainage pattern. But you have essentially wetlands, flagged wetlands, no more than probably 30 feet away from those homes. So once again, I'm not trying to diminish that they do have drainage, but I would say the Goodrich drainage does not go here. As you can see, there's an upland finger in between. The Goodrich drainage goes through here and heads off into this direction. As you can see, there's actually a map watercourse that's going behind the properties on Washburn Drive, and that's where that is. So somewhat out of the scope of the application that is before you this evening, but testimony was provided, and we felt we had an obligation to give you some context. And frankly, this was similar testimony we gave to this commission when when this commission approved Goodrich. One other item for water quality, and I think there's been discussion about stormwater or water pollutant calculations. This is a copy of the DEP Water Quality Manual, and of course, it's the font's so small, this commission, but this was included in our response to comments. But right here, there's a very important statement in the water quality manual. And what the water quality manual says, we're asking you to do X, Y, and Z. And if you do X, Y, and Z, you are compliant with the regulations. Because stormwater pollutant calculations, there's probably a dozen out there. They're somewhat untried. They're not really backed up by science. Every state may have a little different approach. The state of Connecticut really simplified it for agencies like yourself and engineers like myself and the town to review these. They simply said, if you retain the water quality volume in your design, you don't have to do calcs. Essentially, if you do X, don't worry about it. We got you covered, is what it says. So the statement simply at the bottom of this page, right here, says, it is important to note that if the full retention goal is met, it is assumed the pollutant reduction is also achieved and the individual pollutant calculations are not necessary. So essentially what the DEP said was, we're gonna give a set of rules to all the reviewers and designers. If you follow the rules, we've essentially done the homework for you and you have met the pollutant loading calculations that we are looking to achieve. And we have provided the basins include the full retention volume. And now with the fact that we field tested the infiltration rates and they're greater than what we expected, you're going to get even more volume infiltrated into those basins. And I'm sorry, this is a little bit washed out. Once again, not necessarily a wetland related item, but there was comments made. And you'll see this but as part of our, dark skies, the lighting that we're proposing is dark sky compliant. And we did a photometric plan. And what this graphic, and I apologize, it's a little washed out here, but you can see there's a light yellow on the roads. And there you can see a light blue line here. The light blue line there is the limit of light shining on the ground. So we're showing that essentially just past the edge of the road, maybe even to the front door. After that, it's dark. So by doing a photometric plan, we make sure those lights are shining on the ground exactly where they're needed, and we don't have overshadow into extreme areas. So this plan, essentially this is a plan we would submit to planning and zoning as a requirement, but ultimately you'll see that that light blue line is always between the two buildings and fairly tight up against the road. And that's a indication of a well-designed photometric plan where you don't get overshadowing into areas that you don't need to light. So I know we presented this commission that testimony, but by giving you a photometric plan, so what they do on these is they take the lights, they put it into a model, and they put the shine on the ground. And they set essentially foot candles. And essentially this blue line is we trace the 0 foot candle line. And I just want to show that. So in terms of light casting, the footprint of light on this particular project using the light poles that we're proposing is very small. And it's essentially, it's on the roadways where the light is not needed and not out into the woods or into the neighboring properties. And that's essentially a standard that's required by your commission. Most standards say don't get light over the property line, but we went beyond that and we just got the light on the roads as it's required. And that's just essentially to put safety for the residents to get in and out of the property. With that, I'm going to ask Megan Raymond. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Good evening. For the record, my name is Megan Raymond. I'm a professional wetland scientist and registered soil scientist, certified floodplain manager with SLR, where I'm a principal scientist and wetlands and waterways lead. Thank you very much for your attention this evening. I know there's a lot of information coming at you and with you. So I just want to provide some additional information as it relates to the biological investigations of the property. In addition to a little bit of detail on the wetland aid hydrology that was described or brought up at the last hearing, And then we did revise our planting plan within our mitigation area, and I'd like to present those revisions to you as well. So just again, for context, and we're looking at a site, as we've been speaking about for these last couple of months. That's a total of 110 acres of land. The pointer, Tom, is this guy? Oh, got it. Sorry. I messed this up the last time. So yeah, I got it. Do I? Yeah. So our project area is in the southern portion of the site, down in this location. The site, from a regional perspective, sits in the lower Connecticut River ecological community. Within the property itself, we have two dominant ecological communities with an successional upland forest and then an old field habitat. Within these areas, we have wetlands, and within our wetland delineation report that was submitted with the application, we characterized the wetlands across the entire 110-acre property, both from dominant vegetative cover class, functional assessments of these areas, hydrogeomorphic class, but then we can focus in this evening on the four wetland systems that are comprised within the bottom of the site, which is essentially, we're calling this, these are two wetland systems, but they're entitled, they're within the wetland 8 area, which is 1.3 acres. Wetland 7 is a smaller depressional feature with some ephemeral flow. That's 0.13 acres. And then wetland 4 is 0.42 acres. The overall wetlands on the property are 13 acres, and those are mostly dominated by these wetlands in a different watershed than where we're located on the property, still draining to Hop Brook, but through a different sub-watershed than where we're located here. But the overall wetlands on the site are about 10% of the property area. But where we're located, these 1.85 acres, we're looking at slightly over 1% of the total land are the wetlands that are in our project area. In addition to that, we've provided so we have the soil report that describes the functional characteristics of these wetlands, which predominantly are because of the fact that they are systems that are quite small, and by the fact that they're small, they have constraints, just physical constraints to contribution to function. In addition, they have a general hydrogeomorphic conveyance feature, but the conveyance that they carry in terms of surface flow is very limited. We're not seeing a great deal of channel formation within these systems, but rather we have expression of surface water through groundwater discharge in seasonally high times of the year, and that gets carried through these corridors in a very almost ephemeral basis. We have two intermittent features in these locations, and is also at the bottom end of wetland 8 here to the east. But in general, these are areas that are not even seasonally inundated. They're seasonally saturated with moderate expression of surface water. And because of that, and they sit largely, particularly these wetlands to the west, they sit in depressional systems. They sit in the seams between kind of in shallow valleys within areas that have the western portion of the site is largely glacial fluvial, and the eastern of the portion of the site is glacial till underlain. And so because of these characteristics, we're not providing, there's not a lot of opportunity for these wetland-dependent wildlife habitats to be provided within these systems because we have very limited hydrology. We have not a diversity or a great diversity of vegetation within these areas. They are palustrine, broadleaf deciduous wetland systems with a dominant canopy of red maple. And we do have that one area within the belly of wetland 8. It's about 5,000 square feet, about less than 10% of the total wetland area. Is a little bit of tussock sedge at the bottom of the wetland. But actually, that's one of the only obligate wetland plants we're seeing in these wetlands. The majority of the systems are dominated by facultative plants. So they're not particularly wet areas. They do have some surface expression, and they certainly provide function. Throughout the course of these events, these hearings that we've been having, we haven't denied the importance of protection of these wetlands, but what I'm just describing to you is how these functions fit into the overall context of potential functions for wetlands to contribute to. So, for example, we're not seeing the possibility within these areas for wetland-dependent wildlife, or vernal pools, or special wetland characteristics to exist within these wetlands. There also has been some disturbance, as we mentioned before. Our lower crossing within the wetland in this location is a previous cart path. We have some shallow fill within that area, and because of that, we actually have the dominant vegetation within that location is not even wetland dominant. It's FAC up, so we're not looking at even wetland dominant plants in certain portions of these wetlands. I think that, so what we tried to do with our recent submissions is fill in a little bit more information to you biologically, and that relates to the background. We actually provided the rationale reasoning for our functional characterization of the wetlands, and this is something that we do, with the town of Simsbury over the course of many projects that you've reviewed by SLR. The standards are always applied very consistently, and the assessments begin at the time of wetland delineation. We assess the boundaries, we assess the functional characteristics, we assess the landscape position, we assess the hydrology, the vegetation. We don't just look at the soil, even though the soil is what defines wetlands in our state of Connecticut. We look at all of the opportunities that exist within the wetland to provide function so that we can inform site plans to minimize and avoid wetland impact to the greatest extent practicable. So let me just back up one quick second. In addition to the functional assessment bolstering that we've submitted in our last letter, we also then dove in and did a floristic inventory at the direct wetland crossing locations, just to provide you a little bit more context or a little bit more data as to where those direct impacts will take place within the wetland, and how these areas are not particularly. They are the least functioning within the overall biome of the wetland, in particular wetland 8. And I do think if you had the chance to look through some of the photographs that were submitted within that letter, you can see the variation between the proposed crossing locations and then that area of the wetland, which is in the southern portion right down in here, where we've mentioned what's been brought up about a tussock sedge, which is a very honestly common wetland plant. So I'm just, what did I just do there? I flipped this way? Thank you. Okay. And then we're going to get into the next slide. So again, what we're looking at is we assess the overall wetlands on the site. We provided functional valuation within those areas. We're looking at wetland systems that are a little bit more than 1% of the land area. The work in the upland review area, 3.6 acres is a little bit more than, it's about 3% of the overall site. Again, we got into I wanted to just reaffirm or just restate that these biological characteristics are presented in both the soil report, the impact assessment report, and then the 3 follow-up supplemental letters that we have provided through the course of these proceedings. So I'm going to flip on to the next slide if I can figure this out. Okay. I'd like now to turn a bit to the wetland 8 hydrology evaluation that was brought up at our last hearing. This is the watershed that's highlighted here is within our wetland. This is wetland 8. This is the largest wetland within our project area, 1.3 acres. And you can see here that the other systems that are included in the project area are largely not. They don't have a direct, other than the roadway. Most of the work here is outside the upland review. We're not affecting any significant changes to hydrology, to watershed within these areas. The work, most of the structure that's proposed is down gradient, certainly of wetland 5 and just lateral to wetland 7. But this wetland 8 watershed has been brought up quite consistently. So I just wanted to provide a little bit more background as to the hydrologic assessment that we looked at in developing the site plan. There's been some mention that these 8 acres where these 11 homes and roadway are proposed would be diverted from the wetland 8 hydrology, and it would have a significant effect on the physical characteristics within this area. This overall watershed to wetland 8 or within wetland 8, looking at the bottom point at the confluence of Hop Brook is 24 acres. And if you look at this subset of work within this area, we're not seeing that this area, these 8 acres, are comprised of 100% impervious. In fact, we're seeing quite the opposite. Within this location, we previously had 2.4 acres of impervious proposed within this area, but listening to the testimony and the interest, having the ability to refine the site plan a little bit, what we did do is we, as Tom mentioned, we modified the drainage plan to allow for dry wells and perforated infiltration or perforated stormwater pipes to both infiltrate roof runoff from these homes in the watershed, as well as provide recharge to groundwater within these locations. So what we have then overall is a reduction of the immediate impervious routing to the stormwater basin, which is located in this location, which again is still in the Wetland 8 watershed, but is slightly down gradient of this larger, more broad position in the wetland. But effectively, what we have is about 5% of impervious within this watershed to Wetland 8. And we're looking at, when we look at the overall opportunities within this area, and we drill down on the 1.12 acres of impervious, we're not seeing any possibility to have these modifications affect the physical characteristics in Wetland 8. And that's both due to the small area of impervious within the watershed, as well as the design of the stormwater management area, which is, again, infiltration-based. So we're going to have the stormwater that will go into this basin will be recharged to the groundwater table and will eventually flow, portions of which, depending on the storm event, will flow to Wetland 8, as well as flow down gradient to the ultimate discharge point. So this isn't a situation where we're swapping a watershed or we're modifying. This is basic land use practice that you see when you review projects, and these are engineering principles that allow for maintenance of wetland function. And you see these in all your projects throughout town. And we use the wetland science to look at the hydrology, the vegetative characteristics, and all the different functions. And then the engineering allows for maintenance of those functions with tools such as this, promoting infiltration, stormwater management, and the like. Sorry, I skipped ahead. Some of the other details that have come up, this actually looks very washed out on this one too, so I apologize for that. We do have direct wetland impacts with this project. We have minimized those impacts to the greatest extent practicable. Right now, we have approximately 1,100 square feet of direct wetland disturbance. If you look overall at the wetlands on the property, that's 0.2% of the wetlands on the site will be directly impacted by the project, 0.2%. To mitigate this, we have provided a wetland enhancement planting plan at both crossing locations. And these are areas, as you can see from the floristic inventory, that could really benefit by an increased biodiversity of native plants in these areas. There's not a great number of species within this area. It's a pretty low overall diversity, a low vegetative cover in the southern area anyway. And what we've done and what we've presented to you through the hearings is we've enhanced these crossings with two planting pallets. Listening to the chair, Madam Chair, and other members of your commission, we have modified that planting plan to include the woody shrubs, which I think is a perfect application and necessary. And so that plant list has been provided. It's on the next page in a little bit more detail if you'd like to get into it. But essentially, these areas occupy about 0.40 acres of land on either side of the wetland crossing, and they extend into the upland review as well. And I'd also like to point out that particularly on the southern crossing, in the southern portion of Wetland 8, south of the old cart path, there are quite a bit of non-native shrubs in the wetland in that location. You can see them pretty well in the pictures I submitted. Predominantly multiflora rose is the most predominant plant in that location. We propose to mechanically remove that plant and then plant the native shrubs in lieu. So we actually have an opportunity to enhance the condition of Wetland 8 in these areas, and that's an overall benefit to the wetland. I think you'll see in the pictures there is quite of a difference between the shrub layer in the immediately south of the proposed crossing versus further south, which is about 200 feet further south of the crossing, where we have that deeper, more persistently, or the only area of obligate ground cover. And I just would like to take this one, I'm going to turn it to my colleague in a minute, but when you look at all of the work that's proposed with the project, the type of the wetlands, the size of the work areas, the functionality that exists within these wetland systems, what we have presented to you throughout the course of the proceedings is that it's an SLR's professional opinion that the proposed project will not adversely affect the physical characteristics of these wetlands. This is a project that's been reviewed and reduced and analyzed at each step along the way with you. I think actually the project has gotten better each time. And what we have this evening is the most feasible and prudent alternative to both cross the wetlands, mitigate the direct disturbances with wetland enhancement, provide improvements to stormwater design, and all of the data that has been collected to support these conclusions have been provided to you, and we're pleased to discuss it more as the evening goes on. At this point, I'm going to turn to another team member, Mr. Dennis Quinn, who's going to speak about some orthofaunal issues. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. My name is Dennis Quinn. I am the owner and principal herpetologist for Quinn Ecological, a consulting company that's based out of Connecticut that specializes in amphibian and reptile research and conservation. Tonight, I'm not going to be talking too much about wetlands. Everyone else is sort of talking about wetlands. I'm here to discuss issues of conservation when it's concerned about the eastern box turtle. If you look at the eastern box turtle, this is the distribution, the known distribution of this species here in Connecticut. It falls within the central Connecticut lowlands and the coastal zones within Connecticut, typically below 500 feet in elevation. 76% of the total number of box turtles ever located in Connecticut have been found at an elevation lower than 500 feet in elevation, right where we are here today in Simsbury. I do want to note that although you see a lot of red dots and blue dots on this map, this is only indicative of individual turtle locations. This does not and should not give you a sense of the conservation status of the species here in the state. You cannot assume that these individual dots are healthy box turtle populations. That's a critical take-home message for tonight. So if we look at box turtle conservation, one of the things we need to really look at is the level of fragmentation that could be impacting a potential population. I have mapped here all the roadways that are surrounding this patch of habitat, which I guess the interveners have said contains box turtles. I have no reason to doubt that. Box turtles are known to inhabit very small patches of habitat mosaics across the state. In the increasing development that we have here in the state, poses some very interesting challenges when it comes to the conservation of box turtles. One is this site really, when it comes down to it, worth protection? When you think about long-term sustainability of box turtle populations in Connecticut, they're not long-term sustainable unless they are in large, unfragmented blocks of habitat. This, although it does maintain the critical habitat mosaics that this species is dependent upon, it is not a large, unfragmented habitat block. Long-term sustainability of the box turtle on this property is not a favorable outcome. It's not going to happen. There's too many already existing impacts to this population. If you look to the right, there's a large golf course. If you look to the left, there's a large golf course. Box turtles are not compatible with golf courses. If you look at all the red roads,
box turtles are not compatible with roads. We do know that box turtles get struck by cars, causing mortality. But some of the things that we don't often think about when it comes to the protection of box turtles long-term is a lot of the impacts associated with lawn maintenance, things like lawnmower strikes. These cause great impacts to the sustainability of box turtles. So if you can see all these surrounding houses around this parcel, these turtles are in significant threat for mortality, which is why there's not going to be too many turtles on this property. They're already in a state of decline. If we look at eastern box turtles and the seasonal habitat use of this species in Connecticut, they are the only fully terrestrial species that we have in the state when it comes to turtles. They are not a wetland-dependent species. They use a mosaic of habitats seasonally. So during the spring and the summer months, they favor early and late successional habitats, fields and shrublands. During the late summer and fall seasons and during the winter, they go into forested habitats. Nesting occurs primarily or solely during the months of May and June in sparsely vegetated early successional habitats, and hibernation occurs almost exclusively in forested uplands for adults and in forested or scrub wet uplands for juveniles and hatchlings. There is no documentation in Connecticut for box turtles hibernating in wetlands. When they do use wetlands, it tends to be during the earliest times of the spring and during the hottest, driest times of the summer. Now, they are not a wetland-dependent species. Individuals within a population still will not use wetlands. If we look at some studies that I've done, and I've been working with box turtles for over 20 years now, I've tracked a total of 160 individual turtles through radial telemetry methodologies. Those were broken down into 128 adults. I conducted the first telemetry study on box turtles here in Connecticut, 6 juveniles, and 11 hatchlings. I was one of the first biologists to ever track hatchling box turtles in the country. That paper is published if you're interested in reading the results of that. These works that I've completed span 8 Connecticut towns between the years of 2003 and 2024. It's important to understand that during this time, no tracked turtles hibernated in wetlands. It did not happen. My research for my master's degree stemmed from some things that I observed while looking for box turtles as a hobby. I always enjoyed herpetology. And that was mud and muck smeared on the shells of turtles during the early spring. And I was like, they must be hibernating in wetlands. Let's see if we can document this. Maybe they're a wetland-dependent species. Wasn't the case. Showed the exact opposite. The reason you're seeing the mud on their plastrons and carapaces during the early spring is that they're leaving their forested hibernacula, the ones that go down into the wetlands to rehydrate a little bit, and then go back into the early successional, late successional surrounding habitats. So wetland habitat use was most common during the early spring, post-hibernation, and the summer months, especially during drought conditions. They don't always use them in the summer. It's only really hot and dry by some individuals, but not all the individuals within a population. So when I went back and looked at all of my data from 2003 to 2024, which was kind of a neat exercise. I wish I'd done it sooner than this week. I evaluated all of my radio tracking data pertaining to eastern box turtle habitat use in Connecticut. Wetlands were used the least compared to all other habitat types in the state. They used wetlands the least. Within all populations studying, accounting for approximately 5%. So they used wetlands approximately 5% of the time. And when I say 5%, I mean at a total of 12,090 box turtle relocation points through telemetry data collection. Between 2003 and 2024, only 5% of those turtles were found in wetlands. That's 600 times over the course of 12,090 times. And that was either during the early spring or hot, dry summer months. Oops, I almost turned it off. Oh, if you look at the picture on the right, that's typical box turtle habitat. Very dry, sandy, late successional, early successional habitats, and then forested habitats and the ectonal areas between these two types of habitats. Now, if we look at this development, it's not going to be an impact to the box turtles as far as wetlands are concerned. We are going to be performing a study on this site, a one-year radiotelemetry study to document the turtles that are out there, document site-specific movement activities and patterns so that we can better facilitate the protection of this box turtle on this property. You can see I have here outlined those two culvert areas. This was a little bit of an area of contention between my team and myself, mainly because I'm not in support of the culverts. I think the structures, if we're speaking specifically to protect box turtles, which I know we're not because this is a wetlands agency and it's in the purview to protect the wetlands, not the box turtles, this will potentially lead to a avenue for these turtles to get into the development area. This pink line here represents an exclusionary barrier. That's what will prevent these turtles from accessing these homes. So they cannot get hit by lawnmowers, so they cannot get run over on roads, so they can't interface with dogs or other things that might be a threat to them. Now, when you do create these barriers to prevent activities and movement, to keep them in the primary habitats that they need to be using, they can use this wetland passage, but they're not a wetland-dependent species, so they're not going to stay in it. They're going to go through it and then exit it and be in these areas, interfacing with potential harms and threats to the species. I will be monitoring this through telemetry, and we may need to come up with an alternative to keep the box turtles out of this area. The thing that is good about this is the profile of this culvert, or I shouldn't say culvert, it's a tunnel, I guess, I don't know, is only 3 feet high. It should not allow enough ambient light to promote the turtles to go through it. Turtles are a diurnal species, so if your culvert is not lit or doesn't have ambient light going through it, they will not use it. So that is the hope, that ambient light will not be great enough to allow or support movement of turtles through this culvert, but we may have to look into some alternatives to prevent that from happening if they do end up utilizing it. Some of the things that we do as far as examples of exclusionary barriers, if you look all the way to the right, you have your typical silt fence barrier, which is used during the construction process. That's a picture of an actual turtle being blocked from exclusionary fencing, temporary exclusionary fencing during another project. I've done a lot of projects with development and have implemented quite a few different strategies to protect box turtles. This is a project where we implemented permanent exclusionary barriers. This is also a permanent exclusionary barrier, but it's a chain-linked fence, this one being concrete. You can see the turtles clearly can't get through or over that. We will be looking at various methods to create and install permanent exclusionary barriers for the proposed development to prevent turtles from getting into it. The other thing that we're going to be doing, because this development is going to be taking up some of the habitat that they may currently be using, we're not really sure, we're going to be doing habitat creation and management. This is something that's highly underrated in Connecticut, especially when it comes to a species of turtle that is a habitat mosaic species, meaning it forested habitats, early and late successional habitats, so fields and shrublands. We will be managing grassland type habitats with open areas, but also shrublands. Shrublands are absent on the site currently, and that's an issue when it comes to box turtles. Box turtles like shrublands. They use them to bask, they use them to feed, they use them to monitor humidity and thermal regulatory regimes and things like that. So it's critical to have vertical structure in your habitat, not just flat mowed grasslands. That doesn't work. They don't like monocultured grass. They like a mix of herbaceous plants with a mix of scrub habitat within an open sandy areas for egg deposition. So over the past 14 years since I created this nesting habitat at another project that we still continue to monitor, it's actually really interesting. The number of turtles at this site now has increased since we've done active habitat creation, enhancements, and management. Now, I don't want to confuse this project with the one that I'm working on now. I don't have much hope for this one just because the number of turtles at this site is already likely going to be limited with the surrounding development and impacts this population is already facing. We're going to prevent impacts to the greatest extent possible and try to improve the habitat to the greatest extent possible, but this is the ultimate dilemma. Where do you put limited resources, limited funding when it comes to the protection of a long-term sustainable population and its health? My opinion would be put it into a site where they're not going to be facing any new impacts or any old existing impacts. But we're here tonight and we're going to be doing it at the McLean site. So we're going to do our best to protect this species by habitat creation, enhancement, different exclusionary measures, and a study not just to figure out the best way to do this up front, but to monitor it long-term, to see how successful our mitigation and strategies were. I think that's all that I have for everyone tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your patience and your attention. We'd like to reserve the right to respond to any comments that are made by the rest of the people.
All right, thank you. And now the interveners.
Steve Trinkus, for the record, professional engineer from Southbury representing the interveners. We received the applicant's additional information around Tuesday, just before lunchtime. Just a few really comments that, first off, the Stormwater Quality Manual, by using DEP's own language, is a guidance document. They used it on the 04 version, they use it in the 24 version. It is designed to assist engineers in addressing water quality, which until the 04 one came out, no engineer ever did. We always did peak rate control because that's what most towns required. So it is not a regulation, it is not a manual, it is a guidance document. We, heard the applicant, they did do infiltration testing, which I'm glad. But one of the things I noticed was the depths of the infiltration tests weren't provided in the table. The rates were. Now we know based on the soil test pit data, glacial till is in the area of these basins, roughly 3 to 5.5 feet below grade. The bottoms of these basins are 1 to 5 feet below existing ground, which in some cases is going to put you into that glacial till layer. And looking at the original soil data from the first hearing, I think, there was sandy soils above, and that wouldn't be unusual to have the infiltration rates which Tom Daly encountered. However, when you've got a basin that is cutting into the ground at variable depths, you really need to do infiltration testing at each of those 3 points, at or below the bottom of the basin. That's what the DEP guidelines tell us to do. So without knowing the depths of them, whether this is going to infiltrate or not is questionable in my opinion. Secondly, last meeting we heard that these are now extended dry detention basins. They are not designed as infiltration basins. They are 2 different animals in the Stormwater Quality Manual. There are different design parameters. An infiltration basin does not have a permanent pool. A dry detention basin, as the applicant has stated, they are providing the water quality volume, or called the retention volume, within the bottom of the basins. In a dry basin or a constructed wetland, that's fine. In an infiltration basin, that's not permitted. No permanent pool is permitted. So we have 2 different standards. Other standards are a forebay is required for both basins. For a dry basin, it's 10% of the water quality volume. For an infiltration basin, it's 25%. So there's whole different design criteria. Just because you may get some infiltration does not make it an infiltration basin. They're designed in 2 separate and distinct ways. I'm glad the applicant did change the design of the crossings to be a bottomless culvert, which was suggested during the numerous reviews. some of the issues that came up at the last meeting was about the soil classifications to be used for post-development conditions where you have grading. And in my letter on the bottom of page 2, it's well documented in professional literature that cutting and filling soils changes the natural porosity, thus the infiltration rate. And, if you're cutting and filling and you have a B soil, it should go to at least a C class, if not a D. An interesting document I came across from Ohio, they actually list all of the soil types in the state of Ohio, and if you're cutting and filling them, what the existing class is and what the proposed class should be. So it's common practice to adjust it. The applicant has not done that, so you're going to actually see more water from these lawn areas than what they represent because they're still using the pre-development classification for post-development conditions. The comments on the Rawls rates, now that we have infiltration tests, are kind of moot, but the guidelines, again, say that the Rawls rates can be used for kind of a preliminary assessment whether your site is suitable, but you still need to do the actual infiltration tests. Again, the basins as proposed, dry extended detention ponds, which are also known as simply dry basins, that's what we used to do in the late 70s when detention was first brought out. You have a forebay, but the forebay has to have a 2-to-1 length to width ratio from the inlet to the outlet because the purpose of a forebay is to trap the coarse and medium sediments. And when it's a shorter distance between the inlet and the outlet, you don't get the settlement out. Additionally, the bottom of the invert of the pipe coming in was set at the bottom of the basins. Well, that's where all the sediment's going to accumulate, and these are only 2 foot deep. The guidelines do say that it is 2 to 4 foot. We're on the bottom edge of it. However, when the invert of the pipe is at the bottom right here, and that new water comes in, and you've got basically colloidal particles, silts and sand settling out, that water coming in is going to stir them right up, and then that water is going to go into the rest of the basin. That's why a deeper forebay is imperative if you really want to trap the sediment in them. Going into this language of the manual, which quite honestly is absolutely incorrect and not supported by data, this claim that if I provide the volume in a basin, that all of a sudden all these pollutants magically disappear, that is not supported by science or research in any shape or form. And to that end, since the applicant, I think in their initial response to me said, well, I didn't prove the water quality aspects, well, on page 4 and 5, and I think 6 for that matter of my letter, I do provide those calculations. Pollutant loading calculations have been around quite a while. I actually, through an engineer at Ty and Bond back in 2001, did these calculations. So this is not something new and exciting. It has been around a while. The equation it's called the Schuler equation, was developed by Tom Schuler, who was the head of the Center for Watershed Protection and one of the leaders in addressing water quality and low impact development all the way back at that time. It's a simple equation. Because of a lot of data from Bob Pitt, a now retired professor from University of Alabama, Bob was, through the 70s, did a tremendous amount of water quality monitoring of urban sites, and that's where they came up with that the first flush, this first inch of runoff, is the dirtiest water that comes off the surface. And they analyzed it. They found the concentrations of all the various pollutants, whether TSS, nutrients, metals, hydrocarbons. They looked at many different kinds of metals, not just zinc, which we use as an indicator for all metals because they basically act the same way. But this data goes back to the 70s. So we have 50 years worth of data to know how to do a pollutant loading analysis. And in taking the applicant's watershed, taking the published data for removal efficiencies, what we wind up with at the end of the day is that this site will not meet the DEP goal. You will have, just missed one page here. When we get through, we have catch basins with 48-inch deep sumps, we have online hydrodynamic separators, and we have the dry extended detention pond. And while the guidelines do not talk about metals and hydrocarbons, I did the analysis to include them. But basically, on TSS, our goal is 90% under the guidelines. We're at 37.9. That's less than half. Total phosphorus, the goal is 60% reduction. We're at 10%. total nitrogen 40%, and we're at 20. So the idea that this is going to reduce non-point source pollutant loads to meet the DEP criteria isn't supported by fact and analysis. And where that comes into play from the wetlands aspect is this water ultimately is being discharged to a wetland and watercourse. And changes to water chemistry is an adverse impact to the aquatic system. Why our DEP did not include metals and hydrocarbons, quite honestly, is beyond me, because both of those pollutants can be toxic to aquatic organisms at relatively small concentrations, and we really should have standards for them. We also heard that now we're going to put these dry wells in where there were yard drains. Well, in the manual, and I'm just going to use my phone for a second, in table 10.3, this provides setbacks for infiltration practices. From an infiltration system up gradient of a building, foundation, basement, or slab, it's 50 foot. If the system is down gradient of a foundation with basement or slab, it's 10 foot. If we're putting these between the buildings, we're not meeting those setbacks. Also, no infiltration tests were done in the area of the proposed development. So there's no, and we're cutting and filling those soils. So there's no evidence to support that these dry wells will infiltrate water. What they will likely do is fill up and then be discharged through the pipe to the conventional drainage system and go to the basin. We also heard that perforated pipe's going to be used. Well, you know, water is not going to go through a perforation. Water is always going to follow what we call the grade line, uphill to downhill. And if you have a pipe on a slope, and even if the perforations are down, and perforated pipe, the holes are not at the bottom, they're on about an angle like this. So there's free flow in the bottom of a perforated pipe. Well, the path of least resistance for the water is down the pipe. It is not going to go through the holes that are a third of the way up and go back into the ground. Also, drainage pipes, when you put them in, you're compacting the soil around them so they don't settle. And by compacting the soil around the pipe, you're pretty much precluding the infiltration of water from the pipe out. But when it's on a slope, the water is never going to infiltrate. It's going to follow the slope of the pipe because that's the path of least resistance, and that's what the water will follow. Perforated pipe is used in drainage situations to intercept perched groundwater tables and direct that away. We use them on a curtain drain for a septic system all the time. In this case, to put the water back into the ground, that pipe would have to be dead level, and you'd actually have to have almost a blockage to have water pond within the pipe so it could actually perhaps infiltrate into the ground. But if these pipes are on a slope, there's no infiltration occurring. So the whole claim of infiltration between the dry wells and the pipe is not supported by the way things work in the field. We also talked last time about the 5-acre limitation. It is both in the erosion guidelines and the general permit of a 5-acre disturbance at one time. I think in the last meeting, the applicant talked about 2 phases, both of which were greater than 5 acres. The phases have to be less than 5 acres. We cite the relative sections of it. The chairman had some questions, particularly regarding possibly, using LID practices, and that is what I do primarily in my practice in designing lid. However, soil conditions drive lid, and glacial till, shallow glacial till, would be a no-no for any of the practices, whether permeable pavement, even rain gardens or bioretention systems. It's not suitable. Soils drive the entire LID bus, and if you don't have suitable soils and suitable infiltration rates, they're adding them to a plan is basically greenwashing because it looks green, but it doesn't do anything. When you see permeable pavement with gravel layers and no filter course and an underdrain, that's greenwashing for 2 reasons. One, there's no water quality treatment within the layers of gravel, and there's no volume reduction because you have an underdrain taking the water to a conventional practice. As far as that goes. I think she had a question on whether percolation tests could be done. They're actually prohibited by the manual. You have to do the double ring infiltration test, which the applicant, did provide. On the crossings, the question I have, and I did mention this, I think, last time, that you could use directional boring to, bring your utility pipes. You have a pit on either side of the wetlands, and you basically bore a pipe under it. We didn't hear tonight how those utilities, you have sewer, water, and drainage. You can't hang those pipes in the open, especially the water and sewer, because they'll be exposed to the air and they can likely freeze during, the winters here in Connecticut if we ever got a real winter, which we haven't had for a while. But the bottom line is there are still adverse impacts to water quality and I believe runoff volume, because I don't believe infiltration is going to occur. I have dug enough test pits in glacial till to know that you're not going to get a 15-inch per hour infiltration rate until in the loam above it. That's possible, but not in the till layers. Sometimes you can't even get a perk test in the till. So if a perk doesn't run at all, then it's unlikely an infiltration test will run. Back when, in the early 90s, when what we call the minimum leaching system spread came with, as part of the health code, a lot of times you'd hit a soil layer and you think it was fairly permeable because when you dug it out of the hole, it looked like gravel. And basically what we had to do to prove whether it was restrictive or not was do a perk test in that compacted soil layer. And if it perked, great. The sanitarian said, okay, that's not a restrictive layer. If it did not perk, it was a restrictive layer. So, we did many perks trying to prove that, and I can tell you 9 out of 10 of them never perked in a glacial till. The water just sat in the hole and didn't go anywhere. So there are adverse impacts to wetlands and watercourses, and I don't believe the plans meet the goals of the DEP manual. The analysis I did, which is using well-accepted standard practices, clearly shows they're not anywhere close to that. Thank you.
I don't know how many I needed. Okay. There'll be some left over for you guys, so. Okay. Okay. Sigrun Gadwa for the record. I'm here for REMA Ecological Services. And I'm an ecologist, plant ecologist, botanist, but I also am interested in the entire ecological community, fauna, soil microbes, and I'm a registered soil scientist, and so I'm very attuned to the wetland boundary zone. Now, we, I think I don't want as you to be confused or not understand how we could have said that wetland, we've found most of the box turtle sightings that we have come upon, used to be frequent, now much less frequent, were within wetlands. That's not what we said. We said either within or in the transition zone, close to wetlands, like within 30 feet, within the frequent movement range of box turtles. And you need to know that the transition zone is moist and fertile compared to the higher upland forest, and has greater diversity of plants, more invertebrates for box turtles to feed on, and berry-bearing herbs as well as shrubs, etc. So there's a bias, certainly, because if one is doing wetland delineations, wetland characterizations, that's where one is, and that's where one is finding turtles. And it's more but it could be also that the turtles that are caught and have transmitters put on them are less likely to be in wetlands because it's not so pleasant to be in wetlands. It's difficult, and they're well hidden often under the thickets. So there could be sampling bias in which turtles got the transmitters on. But at any rate, as the report says, it quotes the DEP on the many ways in which wetlands are used by turtles, and it may not be the importance of the wetland habitat for cooling down, rehydrating, and in the summertime and in the springtime is maybe more significant than the total number of days that are spent there. But so just to read out loud. In Connecticut, this terrestrial turtle inhabits a variety of habitats, including woodlands, field edges, thickets, marshes, bogs, and stream banks. Typically, box turtles are found in well-drained forest bottomlands and open deciduous forests. They will use wetland areas at various times during the season. During the hottest part of a summer day, they will wander to find springs and seepages where they can burrow into the moist soil. I'm a little surprised, given that the adjoining neighbors on Hop Hollow, and 3 of them submitted photographs, good, clear photographs, which Jess Frank put together in an excellent, clear presentation. And they had GPS coordinates associated with them, so they were able to be mapped. And we have superimposed all the locations that box turtles were found and that figure is at the end of the text portion of the report. It would be page 8, and you should probably open that up. There were a lot more than 18, was it 19 or 18 photos taken, but many of them were of the same turtles, and we were able to just distinguish that there were 18, was it 18 or 19? 19 separate individuals. This is a lot of turtles, and they have been seen, they have been documented. And we actually tried to hire Dennis Quinn. We knew he was a very esteemed herpetologist, and to talk to you. And we sent him the material that we gave you. And so he knows that there are a lot of turtles out there, and he's seen where they are. And you can see that there is a bias in these records too, because the neighbors mostly walk in the fields, and that's why the largest number of records are in that habitat. That's the yellow central impact area. So existing high quality meadow to be cleared is yellow. And the forest and that acreage is 4.89 acres. The forested habitat to be cleared is the orangey color, and that's 16.1 acres. These 19 turtles are using not only the wetland habitat, but very much so the meadow and the forested habitat, and all the meadows have edge shrubs and edge habitat on the perimeter. And so you need to realize that this is a significant population, and really significant population, and there is connectivity along Hop Brook to other parts. I actually looked very closely at the Hop Brook riparian corridor. I don't buy the fact that we should write it off because there is surrounding development. And it's certainly thrived for 30 or 40 years with the homes that are in surrounding are not new homes by any means, and it's doing well. It's doing well under these conditions. The question of physical impacts, I had talked about the effect on the plant community, because the box turtles are important for seed dispersal, and I think there will be an effect on the plant community, especially in the transition zone, along the wetland boundary and just above it and just below it. But that one would have to have a lot more study botanical data to really have an argument that it was significant. I think it's likely, but I can't. I think that that there is a reasonable likelihood of adverse impacts from the loss of the groundwater seepage coming from the other side, coming from the east. They've certainly tried their best with the dry wells and perforated pipes, but there's going to be a huge amount of heavy machinery, soil compaction, grading, the structure of the soil, the pores, the layering that allows for the steady seepage into wetland 8, especially into that very broad, and it's not a small area, it's about 250 feet long, 100 feet wide corridor, and it does have a patch of tussock sedge, but it's got various other patches of different obligate or facultative wetland species as well, and deep organic soil. And the SLR's done certainly, they've used the information that REMA provided and made their just wetland descriptions a little more fine-tuned with regard to the actual biota, but they're still deficient. They're nowhere near what they could be, and the uniqueness and heritage is not just the box turtles, but it's also the moss flora in that area. I was really struck by that, and I wish I had the time to collect and explore and learn more about it. I don't think we can be confident that over the long term, the infiltration in the basins low in the landscape at the bottom of the hill are going to be working. And there is sandy outwash over the glacial till. There's a layering down there. The soils map says that these are sandy outwash soils, and but there's till below that, and over time, the clogging of pores and the role of the underlying, we don't know the topography of the underlying till. So there are questions there. I don't think we can. I think there's a reasonable likelihood that they will not function the way they're expected to. If you read the language in the manual, it says that provided the forebay volume, the groundwater quality volume is retained, and the BMPs are correctly constructed. That's in there too. They're not saying you can do whatever you want just so long as you have the right forebay size. So the commissioner should go back and read that themselves and see for themselves what it says. I really am concerned about, and you can see this on this map here. Wetland 8 is totally separated from the wetlands to the southwest and the wetlands to the northeast by the proposed current layout. And I wish the development were shifted further north or something like that, and with there really is separation, fragmentation, and barriers between the different habitats. And box turtles move from one habitat to another. They don't stay in one small spot. And there's going to be a lot of difficulty crossing this system here and getting to the seasonal wetland resources they need. But that is, I think, not just for box turtles, but for many kinds of wildlife. And the deer browsing is going to change. Without the herbivory and the fauna and also without the birds eating the insects down there, because the birds are going to be frightened away by these clusters of houses. At least a fraction of the species are disturbance sensitive. That in combination, it's my professional opinion that the cycling of nutrients and the maintenance of the consumption of plant matter to such an extent that there's not an overgrowth of vegetation. It doesn't have to be invasive, it can be native too, is going to be affected by this project. And a wetland is, with this high level of function, is outstanding production, export, and wildlife support, should not be basically clamped or cinched in and deprived of its function. So that's all I have for you tonight. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's John Parks. I'm an attorney that was hired by some of the interveners and some of the other neighbors to look at this application and your regulation, and I hope you remember the yellow files, because I'm going to start and end with your own regulation, because within that regulation, you have both responsibility and authority to deal with this application. You have lots of information, but you need to organize it, and your best vehicle to do that is your own regulation. So if you look at your regulation and you do what I attempted to do, which is find how and if the application complies with it, the regulation tells you what you can and have the power to do. So I just wanted to start with your authority, and I'm reading from your own regulation, section 1, which would be page 2 on my compliance document, which is that the inland wetlands and watercourses of the state of Connecticut are an indispensable and irreplaceable but fragile natural resource with which the citizens of this state have been endowed. The wetlands and watercourses are an interrelated web of nature essential to the adequate supply of surface and underground water, to hydrological stability and control of flooding and erosion, to recharging and purification of groundwater, and to the existence of many forms of animal, aquatic, and plant life. Many inland wetland watercourses have been destroyed or are in danger of destruction because of unregulated use by reason of deposition, filling, or removal of material, and the diversion or obstruction of water flow, the erection of structures, and other uses, all of which have despoiled, polluted, and eliminated wetlands and watercourses. Such unregulated activity has had and will continue to have a significant adverse impact on the environment and ecology of the state of Connecticut, and has and will continue to imperil the quality of the environment, thus adversely affecting the ecological, scenic, historic, and recreational values and benefits of the state for its citizens now and forever. The preservation, protection of wetlands and watercourses from unnecessary, undesirable and unregulated uses, disturbance, or destruction is in the public interest and is essential to the health, welfare, and safety of the citizens of this state. It is therefore the purpose of these regulations to protect the citizens of the state by making provisions for the protection, preservation, maintenance, and use of the inland wetlands and watercourses, by minimizing the disturbance and pollution, maintaining and improving water quality in accordance with the highest standards set by federal, state, and local authority, preventing damage from erosion, turbidity, or siltation, preventing loss of fish and other beneficial aquatic organisms, wildlife and vegetation, and the destruction of the natural habitats thereof, deterring, inhibiting, and minimizing the effects of flood and pollution, protecting the quality of wetlands and watercourses for their conservation, economic, aesthetic, recreational, and other public and private uses and values, and protecting the state's potable freshwater supplies from the dangers of drought, overdraft, pollution, and misuse, by providing an orderly process to balance the need for economic growth of the state and the use of land with the need to protect its environment and ecology in order to forever guarantee the people of the state the safety and natural resources for their benefit and enjoyment, and for the benefit and enjoyment of generations unborn. That's in your regulation. And it further states that both the Connecticut general statutes and your own regulation give you the authority to issue with conditions, or deny permits for all regulated activities concerning inland wetlands, watercourses within the town of Simsbury. It's our position that the application is inadequate and incomplete, and it's our position that the board, based on the record, has the power and perhaps the responsibility to deny this application. Now, once the commission found that the proposed activity may have a significant impact on wetlands, your regulation says that a permit shall not be issued unless the commission finds, based on the record, that a feasible and prudent alternative does not exist. That's your regulation, section 10.3. The burden of establishing on the record a feasible and prudent alternative rests entirely on the applicant. That's section 10.6 of your regulation. This is a heavy burden. And where on the record has the applicant satisfied that burden? There are 110 acres of property here. Where in the record has the applicant established that buildings on other parts of this property are not a feasible and imprudent alternative? They have not. Where on the record has the applicant established that developing less than 54 units is not feasible or prudent? They have not. There are less sensitive areas within this 110 acres. Where in the record has the applicant established that it is not feasible or prudent to move some of this development to other areas of this property? They have not. The record does not provide a sufficient basis for this commission to find that there are no feasible and prudent alternatives. The applicant has not met its burden. Based on the record, the application must be denied. Not only do you have the authority, you have the responsibility to deny an application that is incomplete and insufficient, like the one before you. Thank you.
My name is Christy Bunn, and I live at 15 Hop Hollow, and I am an abutter to McLean's proposed building project. I'm not an engineer, and I'm not a scientist, but I have read all the documents the applicant has submitted, including the over 400-page proposal that sits before this committee. Can you hear me? Okay. What continues to stand out to me is not the information that has been included in these pages, but what the applicant has omitted or been less than forthcoming about with this committee. And I'm going to share some of them with you tonight. Some of them we've talked about already. The first is what our lawyer has said, the alternative sites. In Simsbury, wetland applications require that the applicant demonstrate that no practical alternative on their site exists that would avoid or minimize impacts to wetlands. This means the applicant must thoroughly analyze and document alternative sites that would be less harmful to wetlands and nearby watercourses. McLean's is not exempt from this requirement, yet in section 3.4 of McLean's application, they state that no alternative sites were considered for this project. Think about that. They're not a homeowner who is making a simple request to build a deck in their backyard. This is a large corporation who is proposing to build a for-profit, high-density development on and around wetlands. To date, McLean's has not provided any information about prudent or feasible alternatives on their 110-acre campus, and that is simply unacceptable. According to the regulations, as our attorney pointed out, failing to provide such alternatives for a significant project that is part of a public hearing also makes the application incomplete. The next example has to do with environmental impact. SLR's proposal on January 9th also said that there would be no environmental impact from this building project. To date, they have not provided sufficient data or impact studies to explain how they arrived at that broad conclusion. I believe they provide as little information as possible as a strategy to push their proposal through this committee and absolve themselves from any wrongdoing in the future. It's mind-boggling that McLean would be so cavalier as to claim that when you clear-cut over 16 acres of trees, move soil around, add roadways, sidewalks, and put up 52 housing units, there will be no impact on the environment. And while we've heard a lot about the box turtles, we are happy that McLean's has now acknowledged that they actually exist on the property. In the March 20th hearing, SLR had said that they didn't exist on the property. And so we can thank Sigrun for that, for her testimony, that they now acknowledge that the turtles exist. But I would imagine that the best way to preserve and protect the habitat is to not tear down the forest or build 52 houses on the meadow. And I ask you candidly, if this project is approved and there is resulting damage, although I guess I'm not really allowed to ask that question, but if there is damage to the wetlands, Hopbrook, and the abutters' property, who is going to be responsible? And that brings us to McLean's most recent building project, the Burkholder Goodrich buildings, another project that the applicant claimed would have no environmental impact. We all heard disturbing testimony at the February 18th hearing from a Simsbury resident who lives on Washburn Drive. The resident described destructive water issues that began in the neighborhood soon after the Burkholder Goodrich buildings were completed. Detailed information about this issue, including video, has been submitted to you by Jess Franks. At the February 18th hearing, the resident described this development proposal as part 2 of a movie that he already knows the ending to. So I looked at the Burkholder-Goodrich proposal, and I agree with what Tom Daly said tonight about the proposal. They use the same similar vague boilerplate language that doesn't really substantiate their claim of no environmental impact. I'll share a brief section with you. The proposed stormwater management system balances the safe conveyance of stormwater runoff with the attenuation peak rates of runoff while maintaining stormwater quality from the project site. The design of the stormwater management system minimizes potential impacts to existing wetland areas, watercourses, and developed areas downstream of the site. Although these engineers can't quite imagine it, guess what? They were wrong. Washburn runoff was not minimized, and it's become an ongoing battle for those abutters every time there is a significant rainfall. And so I'll ask now for the residents of Washburn, who will take responsibility for the errors of McLean's last building project. We cannot repeat this mistake. McLean must be held to the standards and comply with the regulations and answer the experts' questions. What sits before you is a decision to accept or decline the applicant's claim that the proposed 52-unit development will not adversely impact wetlands, Hopbrook, and the broader watershed. But also before you are interveners representing several neighborhoods, including Hop Hollow, Country Club, and Shady Lane, who live in that downward slope between the Meadow and Hopbrook. These neighborhoods were thoughtfully designed in the 60s and 70s by the same architect who designed McLean. Neighborhoods that were on the map before the original McLean healthcare facility was completed in 1971. And neighborhoods that have been in place more than 5 decades before this proposed development project was delivered to your inbox. When you consider the scope of the impact of this proposed development, you begin to see the applicant's errors and omissions are serious red flags. These red flags have motivated the abutters, who many are seniors, to hire non-biased third-party experts, an engineer, a soil scientist, a biologist, and a land lawyer to double-check McLean's application. And you know what has happened. These outside experts have identified and placed into the record significant errors and omissions, which raise serious doubts about McLean's claims that minimize stormwater drainage, erosion, and other runoff issues. The experts have also noted several places where the applicant is out of compliance with DEEP's minimal guidelines. These errors and omissions are unacceptable for a project of this size and scope. And while they have had months to accomplish this work, McLean and SLR have made no significant changes to their proposal. McLean, however, has found the time to self-promote, host luncheons, and collect deposits for these luxury meadow homes. I urge you to look beyond McLean's marketing campaign and carefully examine what they are not telling you about the present. McLean is not telling us that they have a serious debt issue and that their bond rating was downgraded by Fitch in 2024, or that they have been reducing expenses by quietly closing beds in assisted living and reducing services within their main facility. And they're not explaining to seniors that this life plan community that they're marketing really is shifting their core business from healthcare to real estate development. And the real estate development is not affordable housing. While we greatly respect the work and legacy of Senator McLean, this proposal sits in the present and must look at the track record of this new McLean. And if this proposal was approved, think about it, it would in effect make this new McLean the guardians of Hopbrook and the delicate ecological balance of our watershed that we all understand. And their current track record proves that they're not up to that challenge or responsibility. In closing, these hearings have illuminated how nuanced and complex the planning and development process is, and it's highlighted for all of us the tremendous pressure and responsibility that is on this committee. Just today, you received a letter from the chairman of the Board of McLean applying not so subtle pressure on you to speed up the process. And it shouldn't be that way. The abutters and interveners have invested a lot of time, energy, and resources to ensure that this committee and the town of Simsbury has all the evidence it needs to make a just and informed decision about the proposed project. Like every corporate developer, McLean must follow the rules and should not be permitted to use these public hearings as a forum to make the least amount of concessions in an attempt to bring their application into minimal standard compliance. The Simsbury wetland regulations clearly state that if an application is incomplete, it will be denied. And the record overwhelmingly indicates that the applicant's proposal to build on and around wetlands is incomplete. And because of this, we respectfully request, on behalf of the land, that you reject this proposal tonight.
Do we have order or? Madam Chair, if. Are we going to have order, Madam Chair? If the interveners were done, I was going to ask the minister.
I'm in a butter. I'm part of the public.
Okay. I would like to just jump in with something after we get to the interveners.
Well, do the interveners first.
I originally wanted to come and talk to you about something that like maybe sounds a little lighthearted tonight, but the tick problem. I wanted to talk to you about the ticks. Man, this place is just crazy. When you go out to, if you go out over. Oh, absolutely. I'm talking about the tick problem. So this field and the woods are just inundated with ticks. It's an incredible, if you walk out in the woods on a Saturday afternoon, you'll come back and you'll have 15 or 20 different ticks all over you. Some of the really tiny ones, some of the bigger ones. And I think that the residents of these houses are going to have a tick problem when they get built. And so I wanted to talk to you about the tick problem because the tick problem leads to a water pollution issue because there's going to be poisons that go into the water to solve the tick problem where these houses are. But in fact, like tonight, actually, I don't want to talk about the ticks. I want to talk about what we heard tonight was everyone telling you early on in the first presentations that this is small and that they're going to make it better. They're going to take a beautiful place that's been growing for 80 years, maybe longer, and they're going to make it better. They're going to plant, they're going to cut things and put better things there. They're going to build a road where there is no road, and the road is going to be better. They're going to cut forests down where turtles live or other animals, and they're going to create habitat. So you're going to cut this beautiful place and make it better. I've not heard of that before as a general theory of development or of sustainability with the sign that says making it sustainable. And so I just want, I'm struck by that everybody wants to make it smaller. The instructions that you receive from the town planning staff were that you have a small role, not a big one. What we've heard from McLean is that this is a tiny little fraction of their 100 and something acre campus. In some of their materials, they say it's a 400 and something acre campus. And so they have lots of different places they could put this, but they're saying, no, we're going to do this in a small way. And they're saying that they're going to make it better. So what I want to just say, are they Coca-Cola? Are they McDonald's telling you that they're going to make it better? Are they offering you to sell you the Brooklyn Bridge because it's going to make it better? This advertising hook, patter that makes no sense and defies the common understanding of make it better. So thank you.
All right. Any other interveners speak?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Since Attorney Joe Williams again, since some of the presentation by the intervener was technical, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask Tom Daly and Megan Raymond to say a few words in response because I thought it would be helpful to the commission not to have any lingering confusion about some of those points before we go further into the public testimony. So, Tom Daly, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, for the record, Tom Daly with SLR Consulting. In terms of the soil testing, I would say it's my professional opinion. I have not worked on a project that we've done so much soil testing on a site like this, except one set. Maybe if you had septic, but we don't have septic. We've done 3 rounds of geotech. We've done soil testing in all the detention basins, and we did field testing for infiltration. And for Mr. Trinkus to imply that we were faking the numbers by our soil testing is really just inappropriate. We did the soil testing. Because we did so much soil testing, we knew exactly what the layer horizon was where these stormwater basins are. And actually, it's very visible because it changes to a yellower color. And we were able to do our soil testing. We dug down 3 feet, and we got our double ring right into that soil. Because the color change, we knew exactly where, and because we had done so much soil testing in advance, we knew exactly what the layer consistency was there. So the infiltration testing we did is in pure conformance with the DEP guidelines, and it was in the layer that the detention basins are going to be in.
Is that in the glacial till layer?
Yes. But I will say, we continue to use this word glacial till as it's one catch-all, right? There's hundreds and hundreds of soils in the state of Connecticut, and many of them could be classified as glacial till. Okay, and to just, and I'm sure Mr. Trinkus can tell you, he's done soil testing on many sites. It's always slightly different. If it was so consistent, then why do we have to do soil testing? We did soil testing because every site is unique, every soil is unique. And to just classify this as a glacial till and dismiss it completely, where our firm did, I think, about 35 borings, 25 test pits, and soil testing, which is factual, I think carries the weight over just making a generalization as to glacial till. So all of the information we've given you is based upon actual field testing, not taking anything out of a general statement. The other thing is, I will have to say is, and like I said, I've been in front of this commission many times for applications. We have never done this much soil testing. And part of it, we did it for our own purposes because we wanted to make sure when we did some cost estimating, we knew exactly what the soils we were dealing with, and we didn't want to find out we had rock where it wasn't supposed to be. So we did it for multiple purposes, but 3 rounds of borings is pretty significant for a multifamily project like this. So our soils data that we provided to you is all based upon field investigation. This, as I said, the infiltration testing was done by a professional engineer and was done in the soil layers, what the bottom of the basins are. And they were done at a minimum of 3 feet. And because they go in the slope, we were able to do the test bits so we hit that soil at its lowest point. So that is a field test. And that was, Mr. Trinkus recommended that we do additional, infiltration tests. We did it. So in addition to that, in terms of the testimony, I guess I'm a little confused because half the testimony, Mr. Trinkus was saying, oh, it's just a guidance manual, don't worry about it. I don't believe it. The pollutant calculations don't matter, don't go by that. But the other half of the testimony was saying that we didn't comply to the standards. Well, I'm confused. Is the manual good or not? That's the manual that basically is the standard in the state of Connecticut. In terms of how we designed our basins, the extended detention basin, extended dry detention basin is the closest one. We took it upon ourselves to improve upon that and provide water quality in there. Infiltration rates, we're not going to have a standing pool. So we use it as a guidance manual too. We took it and we improved upon it. We actually, frankly, think that the extended detention basin is the closest thing to categorize, but we made improvements beyond it to improve water quality by providing infiltration and stormwater. So I think it's a bit unfair to say at one point we're not compliant, and the other point where we are compliant on the water quality standards to say that the stormwater manual doesn't really know what it's doing and we should do calculations. We have met the standard. Your town engineer has reviewed it. Take a look at his comments in terms of what his comments, and I don't want to paraphrase for Adam, but I believe the comment says the plan is in substantial conformance with the DEP manual and the town's stormwater calculations. And we have continued to come back to this commission with more and more information to support our calculations, to support our design. One thing for the commission member about talking about, well, how do we prove that it's built? It's not uncommon for a commission to make a condition of approval that a professional engineer has to certify that the stormwater system was built in accordance with the plans. I believe even your town staff made some recommendations that the erosion control plan should be inspected on a regular basis. McLean has no objection to either one of those. We do the stormwater inspections on our plans, and some towns do it, and I will tell you, it does add value. We require as-built surveys. We go out there, we ask to be in the field when they're doing the major work, and then we're able to give your town engineering staff a letter certifying that it was built, so you can have a level of comfort that what you approved on the plan is what you got. So it is a tool that many communities do use. And as I said, I think town staff recommended some regular erosion control inspections, and we're happy to do that. And then one final statement is, Mr. Trinkus said that there is an absolute 5-acre maximum on phasing. Take a look at his comments that he put in his thing. There's recommendations, there's guidance, there's no absolute guidance. We put together a phasing plan generally to break the project up. The project will always be putting grass down and paving and stabilizing as we go. It's not going to be just 2 areas of complete open area all the time. We're always going to be closing that up behind ourselves as we do the work. Because every time you finish a unit, you get the area, the vegetation, the landscape established, people move in, and you slowly move on. So I think ultimately that phasing and that footprint of development will continue to be shrunk and managed throughout there. But in terms of those 2 conditions, I would suggest those can be pretty successful, and we would recommend those. Thank you.
Before you go,
Yeah.
Could you address the 4-bay issues?
Once again, it's a guidance manual. So we have 2 4-bays. So you see these 2 areas. These are sediment 4-bays. And we have those, and as you know, we also, in addition to that, have a hydrodynamic separator up above. So ultimately, we have those designs. We believe, and that's, they're in the plan.
And the pipe height?
We can take a look at that
Suspended?
and raise the pipe. We also don't want to have too much velocity and erosion as it comes into the basin. But the way we do it is we build a berm in between. So it potentially could backwater into the pipe a little bit, but the 4-bay is built in to the point where it would hold the sediment.
And I think it was mentioned 10% or 20% sizing.
Once again, it's a guidance policy, but as you can see, that's not, in terms of sizing, this one might be close to 10%, that one's less. But once again, we as engineers, it's a toolbox, and we incorporate. For us to just arbitrarily just apply the roles to this, as the DEP is saying, we rely on you. We've given you the guidance. We rely on you as professional engineers to find out what works best for the site, and it's my professional opinion. Those basins are designed perfectly for this site.
And out of curiosity, the depth for the perforated pipes from the yard drains, how deep would they be?
2 to 3 feet. 2 to 3, and just to confirm once again, no basements on these buildings. They're slab on grade. And if you look at the infiltration separation distances, many of that is talking about, once again, it's a guidance. These are not large watershed areas they're starting to talk about. The other thing is they're also talking about when infiltration is the primary best management practice. We already have our best management practice if we're meeting the DEP goals through the basins. The dry wells are just additional best management practices. And I admit, there might be some times a year that you don't get a lot of infiltration into those dry wells, but there's some times a year you could get infiltration.
Yeah. And I know I asked whether or not you'd considered rain gardens instead. I mean, have you done the infiltration or the double ring infiltration in any of the possible sites for that? Is there any reason to expect that would you do that before you put in the yard?
No. Well, once again, these are just belt and suspended or just additional add-ons. We've not designed them to take advantage. None of the calculations take advantage of the dry wells or the perforated pipe we put into. Those are just additional benefits to get infiltration in. We did the double ring in the basins where the primary water quality is being accommodated in there. These are some additional just We're trying to work with this commission and hear some of your comments, and we're putting these into there. In terms of the rain gardens, I think when the project was spread out more, and we had more room in between units, we don't want to be holding water, 5 feet off a building. We probably had more room. By compressing the site, I think that's a balance, right? So that was a net benefit. We got a lot more wooded area, we got a lot more space away from the wetlands, but also tightened up these areas between the wetlands and probably took away some of those opportunities to have rain gardens. And the units are fairly compact.
Yeah, are all of the roof leaders leading to the drains? Or some of them?
Not all of them,
Just
some it's proximity. So if there's a yard drain, we take the roof leader to the closest drain. And if there's a yard drain, we took it to the yard drain. If there happened to be a catch basin, we weren't looking to just, add a whole nother layer of infrastructure.
But no overland, no drainage, just to the grass and?
No, because we want to get that, we want to capture that, get into stormwater and manage it that way.
And since you're asking
Yep.
answering, where does the perf pipe go?
So the perf pipe is just, and I agree with Mr. Trinkus, we're not going to get a lot of infiltration through the perforated pipe. So the perforated pipe, just to give you an example, say in between these units, we have a yard drain. And the perforated pipe just ties the yard, say we had a yard drain, I know right here we have a yard drain. We have a yard drain here, yard drain here, yard drain here, and then it ultimately ties the drainage in the road. Perforated pipe would just be from yard drain to yard drain.
Okay, but
Not in the road.
It eventually gets to the stormwater management
Correct.
system?
So once it gets to the catch basin in the system, it would be your traditional pipe system, solid pipe.
Well,
Because-
I mean, but these are brand new. I mean, I just saw
Yep.
this like at 5 o'clock.
No, absolutely. No, these are great questions.
So with the dry well, the pipes go out of the dry well. Eventually, they connect into the
Yes.
stormwater
Yes.
management system.
Correct.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then, and that's where we get our calculations for the stormwater basins. Correct. So the dry wells are only in the yards between units, and in many locations they take roof leaders, but not all locations. Sometimes it's just water is being trapped between the units. And I admit, I agree that we're not going to get a ton of most of the infiltration you'll get in the dry well because the pipe is raised up above and you'll force it in. But we won't get that much in the perforated pipe, but we are listening to this commission and finding every opportunity we can do that. Most of those pipes are relatively flat. They're not too steep, so you might get some. And they're surrounded with broken stone. So it's a pipe with perforations with a broken stone around it. So you may get some infiltration.
Just a clarifying question there. Oops, clarifying question. Are you saying that you're expecting to still get a lot of percolation from the dry well itself, but not on the connecting pipes?
The dry wells are designed in a way that, so you have dry well, most of the volume is below the pipe.
Mhm.
So it's going to force itself in. Yes, you'll get much more out of the dry well.
Okay, because I think I was just trying to take the logic back. One of the concerns we had early on, or that had been mentioned early on, was because so much of this area where phase 2 was basically water going into the surface and basically then going out sort of the wetlands underneath. We were trying by instead of capturing it and all taking it to the basins, we were trying to redistribute it all through that area. So one question that came up is if you're leveling that area out and you have different mixtures of soils, will you still expect the same kind of efficiency in regenerating that water when you're done with that versus what you would have now from your soil tests? Because you're going to change the soil types, right? And you're going to be changing as you're cutting some things off, you're going to level that area.
Yeah, well, first of all, the dry wells are all around the site,
Sure.
so just to say one comment in one area.
Yeah.
But in terms of dry wells, once again, we are promoting infiltration. So the water will get in there, and it'll infiltrate. And it may, in some areas, it may infiltrate in an hour. Other areas, it might take 24 hours. But that's okay, right? We're getting water back into the ground to the extent possible. But at the same point, we're still mitigating the overall thing. So you'll probably get different results throughout the site. But that's good. I mean, and best management practices, there's hundreds and hundreds of different type of soil types in Connecticut. You can't always expect it to be draining in 30 seconds. But it doesn't drain in 30 seconds today, right? So on the right-hand side of the project, we have better infiltration rates. And then on the left-hand side, we have a little more tighter soil. But my opinion on promoting is any good additional promotion of that. And as Megan showed, a lot of that area in this area is lawn. You're going to still get infiltration into there from lawn areas that we're not changing. So it's not like all pavement. You're still getting infiltration through those just general lawn areas with the rain hitting the lawn.
Wait, I did have one more, I forgot.
Yep.
One more question about the forebay, the depth. Does it need to be deeper? Would it help to be deeper?
I don't think so. We have best management practices up gradient on there. We can take a look at it. I think I'm very comfortable in what we've designed. Really, the goal is for the sediment never to even to get to the basin. Get it in the sumps, get in the hydrodynamic separator. McLean has a strong track record of maintaining their properties. It's a management system that handles everything. We can take a look at just to make the forebays 2 feet deeper I don't think is a big deal. We don't count infiltration in forebays. We only count it in the main basin. So for it to be lower, I think that can easily be accommodated.
Would you be able to speak to Mr. Trinkus's discussion about pollutants not being removed by the basins?
So there's probably a dozen pollutant removal calculations out there. And I'm sure we could do all 12 and get 12 different results. And I think the DEP understands that. And that's specifically why, as I saw, I know you came in later, I don't know if you were here when I did it. The DEP manual specifically says, if you provide the water quality in the basins, don't do calculations. We're going to tell you point blank, if you get the water quality on the site, don't worry about the basins. We are satisfied you've met all the pollutant calculations. So the pollutant and the Schuler method is the world's simplest method. It's not that scientific. It's simply you just apply a removal rate to certain things. So I'm here today to say this plan is comparable to every plan you've ever approved with this commission, if not better. And I'd ask this commission, have you ever required another applicant to submit pollutant removal calculations? It's not a standard because the calculations are a bit fuzzy. And that's why the DEP said, because they're fuzzy math, do this and you're good.
Well, I will say we haven't had a proposal or an application that was this involved. We're usually doing decks, little additions.
Well, I mean,
this is very.
But in the history of me, I've done many projects
Correct,
this
but
big for this town.
For this, since I've been
Okay.
on this board,
Yeah.
this is the biggest
Yeah.
thing I've ever
But
seen.
there is no state or town or state or town regulation that requires the submission of pollutant calculations because, frankly, it's a bit fuzzy math.
Well, we have asked for things like rain garden swales, vegetated swales, because they do improve.
No, absolutely. And we are providing, but as you know, when you do stormwater, you have a toolbox.
Yes.
Rain gardens, totally appropriate in some sites. And I've come to this commission, I've proposed rain gardens, I've done different types of basins. We look at every site slightly different. And we have come to you with much more complex projects. Maybe not when you were on the commission, but I've been before this commission with much more complex projects. And I'm just telling you, read the DEP manual. Nowhere in the DEP manual does it say pollutant load calculations are required. And I'm not saying that, but they've made it easy for us. Provide the water quality and you're good to go. And we've done that. And now, if you know, the new DEP manual came out recently. They increased the requirement by 30%. Used to be 1 inch around up, now it's 1.3. So the new manual actually, they've increased it recently. And this plan complies with the new manual at 1.3 inches. Anything else?
Any other questions?
Okay, great. Sorry, Mike.
That's okay. Thanks. Good evening. For the record, Megan Raymond, professional wetland scientist. I just wanted to pick up a couple of the points that were made by the interveners as it related to the wetland function and values assessment, as well as the wetland 8 hydrology. I think it's important to note that the function and values assessment is something that professional wetland scientists, all wetland scientists perform, and there is some degree similar to of subjectivity to it, as opposed in terms of a wetland scientist's own evaluation of the characteristics and the values within the wetlands. To note, within the actual guidance document that lists the considerations and qualifiers of a functional assessment, it states considerations are flexible based on best professional judgment and interdisciplinary team consensus. And I've been doing this in Connecticut for, I don't want to say how long at this point, but a long time. And I present the science-based functional assessments as a trained scientist with both a Bachelor of Science degree, a Master's of Science degree studying water hydrology and water resources. So my professional judgment has informed the functional and values assessment. If REMA disagrees with that, that is certainly their professional opinion. But I have substantiated our basis for our functional assessment. Most notably, I'd like to also point out that as it relates to wildlife, which they bring up again as a principal function, there are considerations within this document that list the qualifiers for wildlife habitat. They include wetland has the potential to provide large amphibian populations, seasonal variations, or wetland exhibits a high degree of plant diversity, density of vegetation is high. This area, wetland 8 in specifically, the 1.3 acres of land that wetland 8 occupies is not a particularly diverse landscape vegetationally. I'm not saying it doesn't have important functions. We've documented that, and those functions have been considered in designing the site plan to ensure those functions are maintained. The other part, as it relates to the tussock sedge, which is in the southern portion of wetland 8, it is in this location right here. It is impossible for this area this tussock sedge area to occupy 100 by 250 feet within this wetland. That would be 0.44 acres. The entire wetland up and down the corridor is 1.3 acres. So the tussock sedge is actually quite a limited portion. I GPSed the area of tussock sedge dominance, and it is a little bit over 5,000 square feet, or 10% of the wetland area. So this is not a 200, and even if it were 250 feet by 100 feet, that area would still not be touched from existing conditions post-development because of all of the mechanisms that we have in place. The maintenance of the upland review area. We have very little work within the upland review adjacent to this portion of the wetland. We have a little bit of grading, obviously, for stormwater basin to the east, but there's no impervious surface within that portion of the wetlands watershed in the immediate vicinity laterally to that wetland area. The other thing I'd like to point out is the wetland 8 hydrology. I think we were pretty clear in looking at the lobe of work within the wetland 8 watershed and the 8 acres. That area has the larger watershed to wetland 8 is 24 acres. The area of work, the impervious area within wetland 8 is 2.4 acres. We have separated that into roof and into road. We have 1.12 acres of roadway that will be sent to the basin. We have 1.2 acres of roof that will be sent to the dry wells with infiltration capacity. And how I understand it with our the professional engineering hydrologist who works with Tom and me, that those dry wells are sized for through the 2-year storm. You'd expect to see discharge to the perforated pipe after a 2-year storm, generally. And what we see in our hydrology or the characteristics of our wetlands are formed with these persistent periodic rain events that are less than the 2-year storm. It's the day-to-day hydrology that really drive the characteristics of the wetlands that we see on our landscapes. It's not the big storm events where everything is rushing down the slope and there's a lot of water that's being carried surface-wise. So I'd just like to clarify those points, and I'm happy to answer any more questions for me if you have them at this time, or otherwise I'll yield to Mr. Williams or back to you all as the leaders of the evening. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Madam Chair. I just thought it would be helpful to provide you that information and hopefully clear up some of those issues right away.
Thank you very much. Thank you. All right. I don't know if there's anyone else from the public audience who would like to speak tonight.
I'd like to say something. My name is Chris Belzer from 24 Schoolhouse Lane. I've been at every one of these meetings, and I have to say, and I've worked with engineers my entire career, and I am amazed at the humility demonstrated by the applicant's engineers on perfection. In fact, I think it would be a good thing that they were consulted on Mike Payne's former property on Iron Horse, that we all know has had significant problems in construction and design originally. I've heard it mentioned by council, I've heard it written in letters, that this project cannot be stopped on mere speculation. This entire project is speculation, including from the applicant's side. They're building 52 homes on property that's not zoned for 52 homes. So they're speculating that they're actually going to be able to build these things. So all of this is basically made up speculation on applicant's side. I don't know how you make a clear call on this. But what I do know is that this is a massive construction project. And as someone had said on the committee earlier, bigger than you've dealt with. It's a very, very large construction project, and it is speculative. It's real estate speculation. It's speculation about whether they'll be able to get this rezoned in order to be able to build these things. And in the meantime, a massive area of wildlife, environmental, wetlands will be impacted by the decisions that this committee makes. And anyway, I wanted to thank you for your time, because I've been here all the way through and watching this with you. I do not, it's a tough decision, but I want to thank you all for your time.
I am new to the area. My name is Richard Herbeck. Since August of 2022, I have resided at 50 Sarah Lane, apartment 214, which is in the Goodrich building. I have a local government management background. I was the deputy village manager of Scarsdale, New York for 9 years. Village manager of Croton-on-Hudson for 28 years. City manager of the city of Newburgh, 4 years. I am in support of McLean's upcoming expansion project called The Meadows. This project is the continuation of a long-term strategic plan to add more independent living residences to the existing senior living options in the area. This plan promises to minimize disruption to the material areas of the McLean campus and the area planned for development. Dozens of acres of forest will be untouched, and following construction of the 26 duplex homes, the forest edges, meadows, and wetland corridors will be replanted with native plants, increasing the diversity of the plant species. Invasive plants will be eliminated. In my time at McLean, I've been impressed with both McLean campus and the McLean Game Refuge. My understanding is that there is no public entity in Hartford County that conserves more land than McLean. over my time, especially in Croton-on-Hudson, I was heavily involved in all of the various environmental laws of the 1980s and 1990s that were coming into play during that period of time. Environmental compliance, excavation, filling, and topsoil removal, noise. I understand Simsbury doesn't even have a noise law. Steep slopes regulate protection, waterfront revitalization, and wetlands. And I have worked directly with the various decision-making boards, councils, commissions over the years that are responsible for the approvals or disapprovals of proposed projects such as this one. I don't have technical expertise as far as wetlands go. I'm more of a generalist, but I have been to hundreds, thousands probably, of meetings like this. I know what it takes to serve as a member of a board such as the Conservation Commission, and your responsibility to act as the official inlands, wetlands, and watercourses agency. And one thing I want to say is, you are all to be commended and thanked for your public service. Coming out to meetings like this, putting in the hours and times, I can remember back to some that lasted until 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning. So thank you for your time and your service. It's well appreciated.
Hi, my name is Donna Summers, and I am on the board of the Hartford Audubon Society. I'm one of the officers, and as the commission knows, we submitted a letter to you that I arrived yesterday or today. And based on new information, including from McLean and others, we would like the opportunity to submit a revision to that letter, an amended letter with additional information. And so we would ask that if this hearing is going to close tonight, which I suspect it will, that we be given leave to leave the record, that the record be left open, even if the public hearing closes, long enough for us to submit an amended letter to you for your consideration. And thank you very much for your time.
Good evening. My name is Carol House. I am an Avon resident and serve as a commissioner on Avon's Inland Wetlands Commission. So as someone who knows firsthand what goes into reviewing these applications, and particularly the extra effort that goes into an application like this with public hearings, I just want to start off saying thank you. And I'm glad this didn't come before Avon. It can be a tough job. And thank you also for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm here tonight as someone who has a deep connection to McLean. It goes back to the early 1980s. I look a lot younger than I am. And actually, it continues my relationship with McLean to today. I spent my morning at McLean at Goodrich, their newest independent living community, volunteering. And though I've never worked and I've never lived at McLean, I've spent a good deal of time on that campus over the past 45 years. First as a graduate student in gerontology, doing my thesis up there. Then as a community-based social worker, visiting clients up there, and over the years as a volunteer in multiple capacities. My connection became very personal in 2015 when my mom moved to McLean. First, she moved to assisted living, memory care, and then eventually to skilled care, and made a very smooth transition. She lived there for 5 years, and the care that she received was nothing short of extraordinary. I say that both as a daughter and as a gerontologist who knows what incredibly extraordinary, high-quality care looks like. I've been following this conversation about the proposed Meadows expansion, and I want to speak tonight from my heart and from my experience. I've seen this campus grow from a time when it was just the health center and a few cottages off to the side, to now, with the addition of the Burkholder and the Villa and Goodrich. And over these years, I've witnessed personally how careful, how thoughtful, and how conservatively McLean has approached each of these new developments, minimizing disturbances, mitigating when necessary, and always placing a priority on the conservation of the campus's many natural resources, including its wetlands. They are something that were integrated actually into my mother's care. Nature is healing. They're important to McLean. They're important to its mission. As someone who sits on a wetlands commission, I can say that McLean's approach to this project as well is not only thoughtful and well-researched, it's far more responsible than many of the developments, proposals that come before municipal commissions. Tonight we saw again how responsive McLean has been, changing and again and again and again its plans to respond to the concerns of this commission and the concerns of the community. I can honestly say as a homeowner that I would welcome McLean as a neighbor. Madam Chairman, would you please get order? That's really quite unnecessary.
It is.
And is not helpful to making your decision at all. McLean is a not-for-profit community resource who I know is responsible in developing its property and incredibly generous in sharing its trails and its open spaces with others, neighbors, humans, and animals alike. Unfortunately, I have seen some public statements made that are not grounded in facts, claims that mischaracterize both the intent and the environmental impact of this project and raise issues that are completely irrelevant to wetlands. Comments that were uninformed about McLean's long history of committed conservation stewardship. I hope I've been able to provide a little insight into that for you tonight. As commissioners, we know that wetlands decisions are not based on popularity or who screams the loudest or who claps the loudest. Those decisions rely on science, rely on the actual plans, and rely on things like the long history that McLean has as being a leader in conservation and stewardship of nature. Thank you again. I appreciate all the work that you do personally, and thank you for letting me speak to this evening.
Good evening, Susan Messino, 41 Madison Lane. I know it's late, so I'll abridge my comments, but I wanted to follow up on a couple of things that I brought up 2 weeks ago. I just want to say I'm on the Open Space Committee, and I'm a scientist, but I'm here as a citizen. I'm not near this project. I've never been on this property. I came here partway through the last meeting because I had watched the expert testimony, and I can see that this is a really, really special place, and with really unique qualities and very high ecological integrity. And it's not something we should take for granted or think that we can reduce to these technical details. And one thing that I wanted to follow up on is the Board of Selectmen unanimously passed a policy or an ordinance, I'm not sure what it is, that we are allowed to request independent experts for large and complex projects. And I'm just wondering, has that been triggered? What, if not, why not? And what are the criteria for doing that? Because I'm sure the neighbors, the interveners, have spent a considerable amount of money on hiring their own experts when this is something that we unanimously passed a policy that the town would do this for large and complex projects. So that's question number one. Point number two is I've heard multiple times that there's no NDDB, Natural Diversity Database here, but anyone who knows about the NDDB should know that the lack of any NDDB doesn't mean there's nothing there. It could just mean that no one has ever looked and it hasn't been fully surveyed. So I think that's an important point to just as I said, I haven't been there, but that's just a point about the NDDB. The other thing is that, I suspect that, McLean's is doing this for the money. And if that's true, and this is such a special place, perhaps there could be some kind of solution where we figure out a path forward where McLean's gets the money and this property gets conserved. I don't know what that solution is, but we're a smart community. We've often solved other very difficult problems. This is not anti-housing. This is not a, NIMBY argument. This is because this is a state-level exemplary spot. And I've read a lot about George McLean, and I honestly doubt that he would have put this property on the auction block for luxury housing. So I really think that, I really hope that we can open our minds to what's really the best thing for this land. And my last comment is about the minutes from the last meeting, which I just looked at very briefly. They looked about a minute long, and I know how nerve-wracking it is to come and testify in public, and I know how much time the citizens have spent not just coming here and listening, but also preparing really detailed and well-informed testimony about the history, the ecology, the George McLean's will, the dark skies, all kinds of things about the wildlife and wetlands and all of that. And all I saw in the minutes was a list of 7 names with no words except for those names. And where is the information about what those citizens testified? Is it in another document, or is it just missing? Because that's unacceptable.
Okay, all right. All right. One more. I think we are running late, and I know we haven't had a break. Short.
Good evening. My name is Ward Mathis. My wife Carol and I live in North Granby, and we are Vantage members at McLean. We've done our research, we've planned carefully, we've saved intentionally, and made thoughtful choice to one day move into the Meadow community or the Goodrich when we retire. We already have friends who live at McLean, and we've seen firsthand the quality of life and the dignity McLean provides its residents. It's exactly the kind of community we want to grow old in, one that offers care, peace, and connection. We're not going there to die, we're going there to live. But I have to be honest, some of what I've heard in these meetings has been very surprising, not just because of the misinformation, but the message it sends to people like us who aren't welcome. Some opponents of this project speak often about the values such as inclusion and community. But when it comes to seniors, even those who have lived in and around Simsbury for decades, the spirit seems to vanish. In our meetings of Vantage members, almost everyone at the table that we sat at on multiple occasions are Simsbury residents or grandparents moving closer to their children and grandchildren. I've served on local commissions, and I understand how hard this work is. I appreciate this commission and the diligence that you're exercising. Good decision-making is based on facts and fairness. So I ask, why wouldn't we welcome older adults into a thoughtfully planned, environmentally responsible, nonprofit community that enhances the very town it's a part of? Why wouldn't we say yes to a project that supports people who have worked their entire life and want to age in a setting that honors them? Carol and I, and many others, aren't asking for anything more than the opportunity to live out our years in a community that reflects the values it claims to hold dear. This is Simsbury's opportunity to lead, not with just policy, but with your heart, to show that inclusion isn't a word that we use when it's just convenient. It's a value we live by. Thanks to Chair Winters and to all of you in this commission for doing your due diligence. My hope is tonight that you'll vote for the Meadows. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll take a 5-minute break and come back, and we'll go from there. All right, if everyone can take their seats. All right. I just wanted to ask, are there any other comments from the public? All right.
My name is Stu Blomquist. My address is at 50 Sarah Lane in Simsbury at the Goodrich. Wanted to make a couple of comments regarding Senator McLean, and not much has been said tonight, and it's not probably in your purview to talk about the details of his vision and his basically mission to take care of the elderly by a facility such as McLean. As you probably don't know, I'm a retired physician. I practiced for 35 years in Granby, and I have been involved with McLean for over 50 years. And to see the impact on the community, McLean and its care for seniors, as he put in his will, has been exemplary across the board. I've had relatives who have lived at McLean, and the care they've received has been exceptional, to the point that when my time came to consider what am I going to do when I no longer want to cut the lawn and snow blow, McLean was the only thought on my mind that my wife and I would move here to enjoy, has been spoken, enjoy living and not just going to a place to sit back in a chair. And McLean provides that, and its care. It turns out that I'm not the last generation of elderly people who are going to be looking for a place to settle into, and McLean is continuing to provide independent living for those of us who are able to enjoy that and the benefits of being at McLean. I can't tell you the number of patients that have been here, family members that have been here, and everyone's experience has been the same. I know that has not been questioned tonight. I know the details have been relating to the new development of duplex homes, but without those homes, the next generation of elderly really won't have a place to go. McLean is not, in my experience, is not in it for the money. It's in it for the care of senior citizens, and I think that's what this at least should be in the back of your minds. Thank you very much.
Anyone else tonight? All right, good. So it's late. It's late. We've received a lot of information just today, and we're looking for things like a full set of plans based on the iterative changes that have been made. We're still looking for a drainage report, and I know Audubon is interested in doing a letter. So I'd like to ask the applicant if they would be willing to extend the public hearing until May 7th so we can receive that information.
This has been first of all, we thank you all for your attention to this. It's been very difficult, and we're sorry this is such a tough application. McLean doesn't think it should be, but it has been, and it's tougher on you than it is on us, and thank you for sitting through it and all. Are there anything we can do if we consent to that we could truncate the process or focus the process or make sure that we're not unraveling 2 weeks from now doing this again?
No, I think those are the things that we need. I mean, yes?
What drainage report?
A drainage report, the full, complete drainage.
So,
This is from our town engineer.
So you've made a number of commitments throughout the process, right? We've changed the location of we've shifted the location of the buildings. You've made some changes to the stormwater plan. Just want to make sure that a full set of plans and a drainage plans that match for the commission to review.
Sure, the drainage report was submitted at the last one, but the plans with the new culverts, with the bridge.
Just so it's all complete.
Could we close the public hearing subject to submitting the items that you mentioned?
I think that the commissioners had some questions they wanted to ask based on seeing.
Because, I mean, some of this stuff we just got this afternoon at 5 o'clock, and I haven't had a chance to review it. I mean, I might have some more questions, I might not, but I don't want to close the meeting and, oh, there's a big question I need answered, or I like answered, so.
Point well taken. We will allow continuance of the public
Thank you very
hearing.
much. Thank you. We appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you all again.
Oh, thank
right.
you.
Wait, the meeting's not over yet, so, do we need a motion to continue? No, we're just.
So you would need a motion to continue the public hearing
Yes.
to a special meeting on May 7th.
Thank you. All right. So moved. Do we have a
Second.
second? All in favor? Aye. All right, thank you. And, no, well, wait, we have no, the last item was designated agent action and other reports, nothing for tonight. So do we have a motion to adjourn? Oh, wait, what? Sorry.
Yeah, so we,
Excuse me, everyone.
so the question is what are we gonna do, what do we have to talk about as a commission?
Quiet, please.
Because we can't talk as a commission after we adjourn on how we're going to take all the information we've heard over the last couple of times and resolve, I think, some of the facts and some of the implications so we can make the decision.
Well, we can't accept any new information once the public hearing closes, but we are allowed to deliberate.
Yes, but the question is do we need to deliberate on anything before the public hearing's closed? One question has come up is, do we need an external expert for any reason? So those are things we have to talk about before we close things. And so my only concern about, like, I want to kind of adjourn too, but we have to have some time to talk about how we're going to organize this, because we heard a lot of different things. We keep hearing similar messages, but they keep getting refined, but there's still some conflicts here. I'm not sure that, if one of the criteria is have we has all the alternatives been exhausted and is all the engineering done so it's minimal damage, I'm not sure that all that stuff can be answered exactly. I think we've heard pieces of it. I'm not sure how to get to that resolution. And we need to talk about how to do it, because this format has been really good at describing the two sides, but hasn't been good to allow interaction with the committee.
Well, I think that was asking the questions that we've been asking, and doing written submission and all the rest. But once the hearing is closed, we've received all the information. It's up to us to decide.
Right. So I guess what I'm asking now is that, and we're asking sort of as a committee, is our next step that each of us should be writing up the questions that we want to have answered, so that when we come back as part of the open meeting next time, we can get them answered specifically?
Well, I think probably if you submit them beforehand.
Yeah.
Yeah, if there are any lingering questions, submit them beforehand.
Okay.
And
So
the applicant can
Yeah,
answer
so
them.
that's what we should be doing, so we should be getting
All
those
along.
back, and so the applicant can see them, and the
And the
interveners.
interveners, yes.
Yeah, okay.
And what do we do about conflicting information?
It is our role to decide.
But to Charles' point, do we have somebody else, a third party, intervene on our behalf to help us make that decision?
We have not requested that. This is, it's kind of late in the game to be asking for the third-party intervener. We do have the benefit of having an intervener, which is something that we rarely have. It's a benefit to this application that we've had the intervener at the process. And they've had expert witnesses, and it's up to us now to determine which expert witness we agree with. And go with, and which one follows, the regulations that we have before us. So, at this point, asking for, I can't see that the applicant would be asking us, would be giving us an extension to go for the third party.
And I think you're probably right, but then we have to be able to state that, why we're doing that.
I think-
And we have to be able to state that in a public hearing way, so that people can
Well, I think
evaluate
we
it.
just have.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, so aside from that, I think if any of the commissioners have any additional questions, I know I've submitted some, but if you it would be only fair to the applicant and to the interveners to do them as soon as possible so that they can come back and just, I mean, they're going to be giving us the full set of plans, the drainage report, the Audubon is going to be doing the revision. We have a great deal of information before us, and it's up to us to make the decision based on what we've heard. So, given that, yes?
So that would be, will the, you say updated plans, is that the 400-page document that's going to be updated?
They would be the full set of plans based on the changes that have been made over the course of this, so a final set of plans.
Yes, the final set.
Final
So
set of plans.
Instead of trying to hunt around
Yes.
and looking at
Yes.
date stamps, and yes,
And if we
okay.
can get that, hopefully, more than a day before the May 7th hearing, it would be very beneficial to the time constraints that the volunteers who serve on this board have, to be able to do their due diligence to look at the reports. Any other questions?
The only thing I would just help with was, I'd ask both the interveners and the applicant and the public, if you're going to submit any information.
Yes.
I mean, obviously, if the public hearing's still open, you have every right to submit it
Yes.
up until the date of the close of the public hearing. But boy, the earlier would be better for
because-
both staff and the commission to review that
Thank you.
information.
And we have had, months to look over these things and consider them, so the sooner the better.
It may be helpful to have a date for those submissions of additional.
May 1st? May 1st?
The day before the meeting?
No, no, the 7th is the meeting.
Sure. And then how about from the interveners?
From the interveners, the same.
Well, if they're on May 1st, then we have to.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, they should certainly have a
Yes.
couple days to
All
review.
right.
Absolutely.
All right,
That would make
all right, yes.
plenty of sense.
Yeah, good point, thank you.
Yeah.
It's late.
Yeah, that would make
Tired.
sense.
All right, so May 3rd or 4th, that would give us a couple of days to read it. Okay, good. All right, any other questions, concerns? Do we have a motion to adjourn? Do we have a second? All right, all in favor? I think that's unanimous. All right, thank you.
For over 40 years, SCM has been the voice of our town,
bringing us together through local programming,
education, and live broadcasts.
SEM isn't just about television.
It's about empowering our community,
ensuring our voices are heard during government meetings,
and celebrating milestones
like our high school graduations.
But today, SEM faces a challenge.
Our funding structure is based on television subscriptions. And it's no secret, people have been cutting the cord.
With a shift to internet-only subscriptions,
SEM receives less revenue,
even though all our programming is freely available online.
We need your support.
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 Your donation can make a difference.
It will ensure that SCM remains open,
continues to educate our youth,
and keeps our community informed.
Thanks to SCM, I've been honing my creative skills, helping me work towards my college degree.
SCM is crucial for keeping our community connected.
SCM isn't just here to broadcast local events. They're actually preserving Simsbury's history.
Join us in preserving Simsbury's voice.
Simsbury's voice.
Together we can ensure that SCM continues to thrive
for generations to come.
Visit our website
or scan the QR code on your screen to make your donation.
Every contribution
counts.
Thank you for supporting Simsbury Community Media,
where your town,
your schools,
and your government come together.